their hands, I believe.
Yes.
If I can go into the Q&A.
So my name's Diane Hennebert. I'm the Stormwater Program Manager for the City of Anacortes, and we are hosting the Department of Ecology today. Doug Howie, who's their Senior Stormwater Engineer and is extremely knowledgeable and a really valuable resource for us. Appropriate siting, sizing, and maintenance of our stormwater facilities has long-term benefits for our stormwater systems, and it's a really, really important piece of compliance with our permits. So he'll be teaching about that. A little housekeeping, I do have you all muted, but you can raise your hands or put something in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that for Doug during the training. And you do have the option to unmute yourself if you have a question. And otherwise, I think I'll let Doug take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to take my picture off just because of the fact that we don't have a lot of bandwidth here at my house, and I'm sitting in my office at my house, so I'm using the same online system that my wife is trying to use. So we've got to minimize the amount of bandwidth we're using. So I see that we have a lot of participants here, a lot of attendees. Quite often I go through and ask everybody their name and where they're from. This time I'm gonna skip that. If you feel a need to let me know where you're from, please go in and put it in the Q&A and let me know who you are and where you're from. I've got a prepackaged presentation here, but I recognize the fact that there are probably questions out there that you have that I may not answer during the run of my presentation. Just to give you a bit of a highlight, I'm going to be talking about what's changed in the 2019 manual from the 2014 manual. And the piece of that is an addition of the underground injection control system. I'm going to go through how you determine which minimum requirements are to be looked at and what are the thresholds and how you go about determining those things. I'm going to also go through the minimum requirements with a focus on minimum requirement number 5, the on-site minimum requirement. That's the one that seems to be the most complex and the one that people are having the most problem with. Then I'm going to close out with 2 example problems. I'm going to take a project and take it through the process, through and including WWHM simulation and looking at the WWHM output to see where you look in there to figure out what's going on. I'm going to be using one project's going to be on till soils, which you guys are very familiar with up in the northern part of the state. And the other portion of the project's going to be on outwash soils, type AB soils. And so you can see the differences that occur between the 2 types of soils, even if you just follow the rules, the step-by-step setup of the minimum requirements and following those thresholds and work your way through, because there's a lot of different decisions that get made at different times during that process. So if you have questions about things other than that, and you were hoping that would be answered here, it can be, but you have to ask me that question. I'm not going out for that to answer that question right up front. You'll need to ask that question either on the Q&A list, and Diane will get it to me during breaks, or out loud if you think it's appropriate to ask that question out loud while I'm moving forward. So that's where we're at right now. We will be taking a couple breaks. I know you're at home and I won't be able to see whether you leave your computer or not, but I need to take the breaks. So there will be breaks that we take for my purposes, not necessarily for yours. I spent last Wednesday and Thursday at a dog trial a dog competition that was being held and I was out in the parking lot and I was yelling numbers to people. So my voice is a little hoarse from all that effort. So I can't keep talking continuously for 3 hours or a long time. So I need to take breaks, and I will be taking breaks as we move forward. So it looks like we've got a lot of more people have arrived. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate your being here. So what we are going to be talking about is the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington and how it interacts with the Phase 1 and Phase 2 permits. How it takes the requirements in the Phase 1 and Phase 2 permits for construction BMPs and post-construction BMPs, and provides a method by which jurisdictions can show that they're meeting those requirements. So the status of the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington, if I can get the cursor in the right spot, it was released for use in July of 2019. So it's published, it's out, it's available, it's online. Anybody can use it if they want to use it. It does not have to be adopted by permittees until either July of 2021 or August of 2022. We're giving each permittee time to look at what we've changed and modify their ordinances if that's necessary. Prepare themselves for the revised findings if they want to do that and they need to do that. And so things like getting classes like this on what's required in the 2019 manual can help you. We did take the UIC, the Underground Injection Control Guidance document. There's a WAC for underground injection control, which is separate from the permit. If you're doing UICs, you're not covered by the permit. You're covered by the UIC WAC. But then there's a guidance manual for that. And we did take that guidance manual for UICs and have inserted that in the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. It's in chapter 1, Roman numeral 1-4, and that talks about all the requirements for UICs. We did that for a couple reasons. One reason being the UIC WAC refers to BMPs in the manual as being the BMPs you use to make sure that you're getting proper treatment before you put the water down into a UIC. That's the primary reason for doing this. And so we wanted to make sure all that guidance was in one place for stormwater BMPs. And this manual is not just used by municipal permittees. It's used by industrial construction, sand and gravel, boatyard, many other permittees use the guidance in this manual to meet their requirements. So there are things in this manual, things like source controls for industrial sites that municipal permittees never have to deal with, but we have them in the manual because the permits, the industrial permit, the construction permit, refers to the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington as the guide for where they need to get information on how to meet the requirements. And in fact, we are following the language of the construction permit here in the manual. Unfortunately, they're out of sync. The construction permit is about 2 years out from the rewrites of the manual. So the construction permit may get changed and the manual doesn't change that language until its next update. That's something we're just gonna have to live with just because of the way the timing goes for all those things. So what hasn't changed in the 2019 manual from the 2014 manual? We haven't changed the minimum requirements. They're still the same 9 with the same names, descriptions, and requirements. Those have not changed. We put them into play in the 2014 manual, 2012/2014 manual. The minimum requirements primarily for minimum requirement number 5 got changed quite dramatically in the 2014 manual. But similar to how we give the permittees time to adopt this manual, we gave the permittees time to adopt the 2014 manual. So that meant we only had a couple years of practice with the new minimum requirement number 5 in place. And we didn't feel that was enough information for us to change it. We didn't have good information on whether it was working or not, how well it was working, how badly it was working, were there problems, what can we do to change it to make it better, what can we do to eliminate if that was impossible to deal with. So we kept that in the same way, same language, same requirements, same everything as in the 2014 manual. Now we'll have another 5 years of working with those things. We'll have a better idea when we do our next permit update in 2024, whenever that is, and we'll be updating the manual at the same time. We haven't changed the thresholds for new and redevelopment. Still 5,000 square feet of new or replaced hard surface. 35% existing impervious surface makes a project site redevelopment project instead of a new development. We have the same exemptions as we had before, the exemptions for maintenance. You can do potholes and not fix potholes and not have to worry about having to do stormwater. You have the same exemptions for saltwater, for flow control exempt water bodies from flow control. You have the same exemptions for other issues that were in place. Plus there's the exceptions that can be made by the local jurisdiction on a case-by-case basis. Those are still there. And WWHM is still the approved model that ecology prefers. We do allow use of MGS flood in certain conditions. You cannot use MGS flood for modeling bioretention at this time, because the module that MGS flood uses to model bioretention is not the same module as WWHM uses, and we don't like the module that MGS flood uses. That doesn't accurately model what's going on with a bioretention facility. So until MGS flood can fix that and produce a new document, we do not allow MGS flood to be used for modeling bioretention, but it can be used for modeling flow control in ponds, detention ponds, just fine. There's no problem with that. What else hasn't changed? Our runoff treatment, flow control, BMP design criteria. You still have to have a swale that's 100 feet long. You still have to have a wet pond, has to have the 6-month storm storage volume in it. The side slopes have to be the same. You have to have the 2 different basins as you're dealing with that. We have not changed those things. We haven't changed it for bioretention. We haven't changed it for permeable pavement. Those are all the same. The location in the manual that those are described has been changed for many of them. We did have cases, the 2014 manual, where you'd go into volume 3 and look for a BMP in volume 3, and it would say, go to volume 5 to find the design criteria for this. And other BMPs, you'd go into volume 5 and it would say, go to volume 3 to find the information. We have eliminated that. We now have all the design criteria for all the BMPs. Flow control and treatment are all in volume 5 now. Volume 3 talks about how to do the how to select BMPs, not how to design them, but how to select them, and how to do the hydrologic analysis, how to run WWHM, what their different design storms, that kind of information. So the BMP design criteria is in volume 5 now. It may have been in volume 3 in the past. It's been moved to volume 5. So we're trying to eliminate that duplication that we had between sections. What has changed? So we've revised the text. I just talked to you about a way that we've revised text. We've corrected typos and errors. We've done our best to eliminate redundancies, where you look in one section and it says one thing, and you go to 3 paragraphs later and it says it again, and 3 paragraphs later it says it again. We have tried to eliminate those things. We've identified 9 significant changes, and these 9 significant changes are detailed if you go to the website and look at the executive summary tab on the online Stormwater Management Manual Western Washington page, you can see those 9 significant changes. We did this for a couple reasons. One of those reasons being the phase 1 permittees all have equivalent manuals. And so we wanted to make sure that they knew that these changes were made and that they needed to make the same change in their equivalent manual. So as we are reviewing the equivalent manual from Seattle and King County and Snohomish County, we're looking for these significant changes, making sure that they've acted on them and got them in place. So what are these changes? So the first one is on our continuous simulation modeling, WWHM. The WWHM, you have to use WWHM 2012. The WWHM 4 is no longer accepted. WWHM 2012 has the ability to model LID applications. You had to do a workaround in the earlier version because it did not have bioretention. It did not have a permeable pavement module. 2012 does have a bioretention module, and it does have a permeable pavement module. And so you have to use WWHM 2012. You can use MGS flood, but you really can't use it for bioretention because at this point in time, it doesn't have a bioretention module. It will, they're working on it, but we have to, at ecology, we have to review it and make sure we're getting similar answers between the two models so that we can accept MGS flood. We also are requiring a 15-minute time step. So all the precipitation data that is available to you now, all the new precipitation data for every county is all in 15-minute time steps. So when you run a simulation and you use the new rainfall data, it'll be a 15-minute time step, and you'll be running the correct data. You can't run an hour time step anymore. You have to run the 15-minute time step. We've got a modification in the redevelopment flowchart. When you go into the redevelopment flowchart, and I'll talk about this in more detail when I talk about the flowchart, when you're on the second set of questions, you're going down on the right-hand side of the flowchart. There's a big box there, and that big box says, do you have more than 5,000 square feet of new or replaced hard surface? And are you changing the value of this project site by more than 50%? That's not the exact language, but it's the gist of the language. We have changed the terminology there, and we're using project site there, not site. There were people that were doing things on an airport, for example, where the site that's owned is that big airport, and they were making expensive changes to hangars. And those expensive changes to hangars didn't have to have stormwater controls on them because they weren't increasing the value of the site by that 50%. So now we've changed it to project site. So that hangar area is the thing we're looking at for the increase in value, not the full airport, but the area around that hangar, as an example. We have got we can allow some equivalent area now. So if you can provide, you can't provide a BMP on the project site, but you got an equivalent area, and equivalent meaning equivalent in area and runoff characteristics and pollutants, then you can apply the BMPs for that equivalent area instead of the initial site. That is a project by project basis, and the local jurisdictions have to make a determination on whether they'll accept that or not. We made changes to 3 of the minimum requirements. Minimum requirement number 2, we had to update to match the latest construction stormwater general permit. Change language, we still have the 13 elements, but they're described differently. There's some different BMPs, things like that are happening in there. Mineral requirement number 5, we had a loophole. We had we missed adding the requirement for BMP T5.13 soil quality and depth when we were referring to projects that only had to deal with mineral requirements 1 through 5, projects that are between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet of new or replaced hard surface. So we got that in this one. We found that and got it in this change. And mineral requirement number 7, which is flow control, we know that saltwater bodies, Puget Sound, for example, is a flow control exempt water body, but we didn't really have it identified as such. So we've added the term marine water bodies to the flow control exempt list. So it's just adding one new thing to that list, but it is adding something to that list. That's 6 of them. Now here's the last 3. So BMPs C151 and C154 are concrete washout BMPs. And we clarified where truck washout can go. Washout from tools and the chute on a concrete truck can be washed out into preformed areas that are going to get concrete at a later time. They don't have to wash it out into a concrete washout area. They can put it into these preformed areas and then bring concrete later and put it over that. You cannot wash out the truck, the tank, the big cylinder that contains the concrete and spins. That cannot be washed out into these areas. That has to be washed out into the larger washout area. So that's been clarified in those BMPs. We added 17 new source control BMPs. Source control BMPs are used when you have a commercial or industrial site to keep rainfall from contacting pollutants. And we added 17 new ones. Things like source control for hot tubs and pools. Discharging of water from hot tubs and pools is one of the new ones we've added. How to do some landscape management is another one we've added. So these 17 new source control BMPs are in our manual. And in mineral requirement number 8, wetlands, we now have a requirement that if a landowner has legal access to a wetland, they need to do monitoring and modeling of these wetlands if they're high value wetlands. We've also retained the guidance from the 2014 manual. So there are 2 tracks that you can follow to meet the wetland guidance, depending upon whether you have access to the wetland and can create a stage storage discharge curve, for example, for that wetland. So you can model the operation of that wetland over time and determine if you have an impact on that wetland or not. Some other smaller changes. We've expanded our guidance for regional facilities. This is Appendix 1D. So if a jurisdiction wants to build a regional facility up front to deal with flow control for a larger regional area and allow people that build in that regional area to pay for that regional facility and not build stormwater detention on their site, we've got additional guidance for how to do that. We've created a stormwater control transfer program where you take runoff from, you let people who have got to do development not do BMPs on their site, but you have the BMPs be applied on some other site. This is primarily to help us save our endangered stream channels and recognize that there are some areas, highly urbanized areas that have already destroyed the existing creek by putting it into piping underground. It doesn't do us a lot of good to do more stormwater controls upstream of that stream. Let's do stormwater controls on a stream that needs the help. And so the stormwater control transfer program can do that. And lastly, we incorporated, as I said before, the UIC program guidance in section I-4. And we will be eliminating the UIC guidance manual for those of you who are familiar with the UIC guidance manual. So let me talk a little bit about UICs. I recognize the fact that up in the Anacortes area and Skagit County, there's not a lot of soils that make it available for you to do shallow UICs. And you probably don't use a lot of dry wells and infiltration trenches and things like that where you are. But there is a capability of building a dry well that we call a deep dry well that can be drilled through a impermeable layer, a shallow impermeable layer, and into the permeable vadose, the area that is unsaturated above the water table, the area that remains unsaturated, that's the vadose, and into that vadose and get rid of water that way. And those are UICs. And if you're going to do that, you need to follow the UIC guidance. So we've incorporated the UIC guidance in the manual, and that may be a place where you end up using UICs. So we've clarified when they apply. So UICs apply as opposed to the permit applies. UICs apply if you are taking all the water from a project and putting it into UICs. There is no discharge, there's no overflow, no bypass, no discharge off that site into the MS4. If that's the case, the MS4 permit doesn't apply because the MS4 permit controls discharges to the MS4 and discharges from the MS4. And so if you're not discharging into the MS4 and you're putting water into UICs, you have to get authorization to do that through the UIC rule. And so we're describing that process. And so in the edits we've done here, we've identified how you determine what level of treatment you need before a UIC, because we're not doing minimum requirement 6 for treatment. We have to do treatment some other way. We've done some pollutant loading treatment capacity combinations because that's what determines how much treatment you need. And we've also looked at the fact that if we put UICs in areas where there are public water supplies, we may be contaminating those public water supplies, and the Department of Health doesn't like that. And those public water supplies don't like that. So we are putting in some requirements to help protect drinking water. So the location of UICs is being controlled, particularly those that are deep UICs, the ones that go through that impermeable layer into the vadose, a lower vadose zone. We're looking very carefully at what happens there. And these have to be registered with ecology. Mary Shalene Hansen at headquarters is the ecology lead for UICs, and all UICs that are being constructed in the state of Washington have to be registered through her. She reviews your UIC registration application. So deep wells, we've gone to great detail to make sure that deep wells are fully specified. We have a group of people that meet regularly with the Department of Health and other concerned entities to make sure that everyone is going to be happy with the rules that we put in place for UICs. And so these rules may get adjusted as time goes on to better protect groundwater, because we don't want to contaminate groundwater with stormwater. So we're doing lots of things to make sure we're going to be meeting those requirements. Notifications. If you want to build a UIC, you need to register it, and you need to apply for registration at least 60 days prior to building it. The old rule allowed them to build it and then apply, and that's too late for us to stop it. So now you have to apply up front. And if you have a deep injection well, that means that there's going to be a conversation with Department of Health and any concerned water purveyors that may be down gradient of that well. So we need that extra time to do our evaluation. And we have an online search site to help you identify where you may have problems with UIC wells. So why are we doing this? So we recognize there's confusion between the rule and the manuals. And so we wanted to kind of clarify that. We want to better clarify when UIC guidance is needed. Industrial permits refer to the manual, and industrial permittees use UICs. So they didn't refer to the UIC guidance document, they referred to the manual. So we needed to have it in the manual, if nothing more than saying that here it is, you have to go look this place for the guidance. We felt it was better for us to put it in the manual. And so we can now eliminate that guidance manual. So I've just finished talking about the 2019 manual, how it changed from the 2014 to the 2019. Are there any questions on what I've covered so far? I'm looking up at the Q&A section and don't see any open questions.
Nothing so far.
Anyone want to unmute themselves and ask a question? Takes a lot more bravery to do that than it does to just write a question in Q&A, but I'm willing to take it. No? Okay. I'm hoping people are out there still. Haven't just turned on their computer and walked away. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what a reviewer should see, what a reviewer should expect to receive from a developer, from a applicant, let's call him an applicant, to the jurisdiction for a building permit that includes the need to do stormwater. The permit is big enough that stormwater requirements are in place, are required. So what should you see? What should you look for? And what should you ask for in your applications, in your submittals from the applicants? And your primary responsibility as a reviewer of these applications for stormwater is to see that if the permit / manuals criteria is being met, your internal city criteria may be more strict than the manual and permit have it. That's great. We love that idea. And if that's the case, you need to make sure that yours is being met. But at a minimum, you need to make sure that the manual's requirements are being met. That if a project has more than 5,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface, they're looking to meet minimum requirements 1 through 9. And if they have more than 5,000 square feet of pollution generating hard surface, they have to meet minimum requirement number 6. And how do they go about meeting minimum requirement number 6? You have to look at that and make sure they're doing it properly. They've got the correct, they're treating for the correct pollutants, and they have the BMP that can treat for those pollutants, and that BMP is sized correctly to treat those pollutants. All things that you as a reviewer need to do, or you as a applicant need to make sure that you have in your application, because if you don't have them there and the applicant can't find them, they're going to ask you about them and send it back to you, and that's time, and time is money, and you don't want to spin your wheels. So let me talk a little bit about our theory behind how we've set up our minimum requirements. What we want to have post-development is we want to have what things were happening. This is what happens when you get development is you end up getting a lot more surface runoff. You end up getting a lot less groundwater. You end up losing a lot of interflow, and you lose a lot of evapotranspiration. And this development causes problems with streams, water quality and flow. It erodes the stream sides. It puts pollutants in there. It brings pollutants in to kill the salmon, which in turn can't feed the orcas, which alarm people across the country that our orcas are dying, and we want to stop that from happening. We want to do everything we can to stop that from happening. What we want to do is make things look like it was pre-development. We know we can't do that completely, but we are doing what we can by controlling new development and redevelopment to the extent we can, and by having grants within ecology to jurisdictions to build runoff flow and treatment, water quality treatment BMPs on areas that currently are developed but don't have those BMPs. And what we are focusing on primarily is trying to get as much water back into the ground as we possibly can, as close to where the rain falls. So we are focusing back on the site of development, and we're trying to get new development and redevelopment to infiltrate runoff on their site. And that's what minimum required number 5 is all about. It's to make developers, make applicants look at the site that they're developing on and keep as much water on site as they possibly can. We recognize that there are times when you can't keep water on site. You're on 50 feet of hard pan and it's impossible to infiltrate anything. And the only thing you can do is let it run off. Great, but can you do some dispersion to slow it down? Can you do some, can you put in in the porosity in that soil? And that helps all along. That makes things much better for all of us to do those kinds of things. And so that's what we want to have happen. So that's our theory behind what we're doing with our 9 minimum requirements. So your primary goals of the reviewer are to ensure the necessary field work is completed. Because we want things to be done on site, there's a lot more field work that needs to be completed and analyzed and turned in with the application. Confirm the correct identification and application of the minimum requirements. You know, did they do all 9? Did they look at all 9 correctly? And confirm the BIP design. So let's look at the first step here, the obtain a good description of project and field work. So of course you need the topographic map. How do you know where water is going to go without a topographic map of the existing conditions and of the developed conditions, showing where buildings are and where they're going to be and where underground things are and where you're going to be putting your stormwater controls. All that kind of good stuff needs to be submitted. The second thing, which people have not been doing in the past, but which we see a strong need for, and we are emphasizing in the manual as best we can, is the geotechnical evaluation of the site. If you're going to keep water on site and have it infiltrate, you need to know how well it can infiltrate. You need to know if your infiltration rate is 0.3 inches per hour or 3 inches per hour. And the only way you can really know that is by doing geotech evaluation on that site and running effective tests to evaluate what's going on. Just dumping some water on the site and seeing how long it takes to infiltrate is probably not adequate. But a large scale pit test is probably overkill in many cases. So you as a jurisdiction and you as an applicant need to determine what's necessary to make everyone comfortable that you have adequate information. You also need to identify where there might be steep slopes. And so if you put water in the ground, you don't want it to flow directly out and create a spring. You don't want it to go through contaminated soils. You don't want it to go to wells and contaminate the water going to wells. So you need to know where those things are. And lastly, there's a thing called site suitability criteria, SSC. And that is criteria that ecology has identified. I believe there's 9 of them, has identified that you need to have on the site in order to be able to adequately discharge water into the soils and use the existing soils to provide treatment for the water before it gets into the aquifer, before it gets into the vadose zone and then below the water table. And those site suitability criteria are some that are needed to be evaluated by a soil scientist or a geotechnical engineer or someone with a knowledge of soils. And all this information gets used to determine design factors and feasibility that you're going to be looking at later on in your analysis. You can't identify that bioretention is infeasible under minimum required number 5 using the list option if you haven't gone out and looked at the soils and determined what the infiltration rate is, because one of the infeasibility criteria for minimum for bioretention in the list option is 0.3 inches per hour. Okay, now let's look at how you identify the minimum requirements. And minimum requirements are based on the size of the project, right? You have to, if you have more than 5,000 square feet of new or replaced impervious or hard surface, you have to meet all 9 minimum requirements. And the amount of hard surface is what you use in the size of the project and the extent of the land disturbed. So if all you're going to go out and do is cut down 3 acres of forest, you're exceeding the minimum requirement for new development, and you have to meet all 9 minimum requirements for that cutting down of 3 acres of forest. You don't have to be putting down impervious surface to have to do minimum requirements. You may get to minimum requirements just by doing some permeable products. So here's our flow chart. You've probably all seen this flow chart, probably all tired of this flow chart, but this gets you where you need to go. And so the first question is, does the existing site have more than 35% or more impervious surface? Simple question. And you can get that very easily from your topo map. And if the answer is yes, it's a redevelopment project. And so you go to the redevelopment flowchart, and I'll describe why we have a redevelopment flowchart separate from a new development flowchart in a minute. And so now if it's a new development, you look to see if you're adding more than 5,000 square feet or more of new replaced hard surfaces. And if so, you'd have to do all 9 minimum requirements to all the new project surfaces. If no, here's where we look at the permeable surfaces. If you're converted 3/4 an acre or more of native vegetation to lawn or landscape, or 2.5 acres of native vegetation, the forest, for example, to pasture, which is what you're going to essentially do when you cut down the trees. You have to, if you did that, you answer yes, and you have to do all 9 minimum requirements. If it's no, now we're looking to see if you have more than 2,000. If you're between 2,000 and 5,000, you have to do minimum requirements 1 through 5, not 1 through 9. And if you don't have that 2,000 or 7,000 square feet of land disturbing activities, you only have to do minimum requirements 1 and 2. Stormwater controls during construction. So new development is pretty straightforward. More than 5,000, you do all 9 minimum requirements. 2,000 to 5,000, you do minimum requirements 1 through 5. And if you don't have at least 2,000, single family homes, for example, probably won't have 2,000 square feet of new plus replaced hard surfaces. They're not going to have to do any of they're just going to have to do stormwater controls during construction. So if we answered yes to that 35% and we became a redevelopment project, we're going to come over to this a different flow chart. It's been there all along. It's not a new flow chart, but it's there. And we're kind of coming at this in a slightly different direction. And the reason we're doing this in a slightly different direction is because we want people to do infill. We want people to take existing developed sites and change them and modify them and make them more valuable and do stormwater controls on that site where there's no stormwater controls right now. And so we want to give them an opportunity to have to do less stormwater controls on that site when it's redeveloped, so that they're not going to say, well, I have to pay more for stormwater controls if I do this. I'd rather go outside and to spoil some new land. So we're trying to give them a little benefit, a little incentive to infill. And so the way we're doing that is by following this flow chart. So we start out by looking at the 2,000 square feet or more, the ones that needed to do minimum requirements 1 through 5. And if you are 2,000 square feet or more on a redevelop project, you have to do 1 through 5 for all new and replaced hard surfaces and land disturbed. Exactly what you would have to do if this was a new development. No change at all if you're between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet. Now, if you have 5,000 square feet or more of new hard surfaces, or you convert the 3/4 acre, you convert the 2.5 acres, just like that second box on the new development one. Now I've got to go to another page because I couldn't get all this on one PowerPoint slide. Oops. I went too far. There we go. Hang on. There we go. All right, so now we've answered yes, and we come down here to the all minimum requirements apply to the new hard surfaces and converted vegetation areas. I brought that box into this slide. It's on both slides. And if I'd answered no up there, I would be over here at, is this a road project? So now we're from both directions, whether we answered yes or no, we're at this, is this a road project question? And if it is, now we're asking, does the project add more than 5,000 square feet of new hard surfaces? Replaces come out of that. So is it adding more than 5,000 square feet of new hard surfaces? So if you're taking an existing road and taking it down to and stripping it off but leaving the existing pavement there and coming back and giving an overtopping, that's not a new hard surface. So that doesn't count. And if you take it down to base course and put pavement back on top of it, that's replaced hard surface. That's not new hard surface. That's replaced hard surface. And so again, you don't, if that's what you're doing, you're not adding new hard surface. So you'd be answering no. And that takes us to the no additional requirements box, which means you have to do, if you have a road project and you're not adding 5,000 square feet or more of new hard surface, even if you're adding 5,000 square feet or more of replaced hard surface, you only have to do minimum requirements 1 through 5 on everything. You don't have to do minimum requirements 6 through 9. Now, if it's not a road project, it's a new subdivision, or it's a new strip mall in a place where there was a parking lot or something along those lines, you go down to this big box on the right-hand side, which is the one I talked about earlier when I was talking about our changes in the manual. And now you go through the new and replaced hard surfaces of 5,000 square feet or more, which is what we're already at. And the value of the proposed improvements plus interior improvements are greater than 50% of the assessed or replaced value of the site, the project site. That should say project site improvements. Sorry, I got a typo there. I didn't update it for the new manual, but that should be the project site improvements. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that if you're doing a redevelopment project someplace and you're not making it more valuable somehow, you don't need to do flow control and runoff treatment. And the thought behind that is we're already discharging from impervious surfaces already. This new work that's being done there isn't increasing the impervious surface that's being discharged. So in order to get people to come and build inside the city limits and to infill, we want to let them not have to deal with stormwater if they're not making it worse than it already is. If they're adding new impervious surface, or they're making the value of the site much better, they should have to pay for doing new stormwater. But if they're not doing a lot more, they should have to do less stormwater. And so if they are increasing the value, they have to do minimum requirements 1 through 9 for the new and replaced surfaces. If they aren't, they have to do minimum requirements 1 through 6, or 1 through 9, excuse me. We have to go back up here to, they have to do 1 through 5 for all the new and replaced hard surfaces. And they don't have to do anything else for the replaced surfaces further on. Okay, you need to look at that project site very specifically to determine which way you go on this flow chart. But infill gets lots of benefits that new development doesn't get. And here's another way to look at this is for new development, greater than 5,000 square feet or 3/4 acre or 2.5 acres, you have to do minimum requirements 1 through 9. Between 2,000 and 5,000 and 7,000 in those acreages, you have to do minimum requirements 1 through 5. And all projects less than that, you just have to do erosion control during construction. Now for redevelopment conditions, new hard surface and converted pervious surfaces. These are converted perviouses are land that's been cleared and landscaped. The same as the new development. So if you have more than 5,000, you have to do new hard surfaces and converted pervious surfaces, all 9 minimum requirements for the new hard surfaces and converted pervious surfaces. Now, replaced hard surfaces are different. Replaced hard surfaces you have to do if you are you have to do 1 through 5 on replaced hard surfaces if you have more than 2,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface. 1 through 5 on replaced. But you only have to do 6 through 9 flow control, runoff treatment, maintenance manuals. If you have more than 5,000 square feet of new hard surfaces for roads, and you're increasing the value of the project site for site projects. So you can get by if you have a strip mall, for example, and you've got the site is completely paved, and you're going to tear up the pavement, or you're gonna tear up a portion of the site and build your building on that portion of the site, and you're going to leave the existing pavement in place. You don't have to deal with the runoff from that existing pavement. And you don't have to deal with runoff from replaced pavement if you aren't increasing the project's value to any great extent. So there's a need to pay close attention to where you are on these flow charts so that you get The benefit, if you're doing infill, of what you need to treat and deal with, if you're doing a redevelopment project. If you're doing a new development project and you have more than 5,000 square feet, you got to do all 9 minimum requirements. But in redevelopment, you may not have to apply treatment for the replaced or the existing surfaces. Confusing, hopefully a little less confusing now. Questions on how you select minimum requirements?
And Doug, there are a couple questions in the Q&A box.
Okay. You want to read them?
Yes. First one actually goes back to UICs. It says, are all sites that fully infiltrate required to obtain a UIC permit regardless of dimensions of infiltration facilities?
If you are installing a UIC, a dry well, or a infiltration trench, or storm chambers, those yellow half cylinder chambers that you can put under a parking lot and can infiltrate through the bottom, those are all UICs. If you're installing those, you must register the UIC. Approval of those UICs as flow control. What we're suggesting to jurisdictions is that even if somebody is planning to do 100% infiltration with flow control for UIC and using UICs, that the jurisdiction review that submittal, because if the UIC fails, the jurisdiction is going to receive water. And so we want to make sure that the jurisdiction knows where UICs are being installed and is aware of the potential for having to deal with overflow. But registration is required for UICs. Hope that answered the question.
And if the people who wrote these questions, if you have additional questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and just pop in then with whatever you need clarification on. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question, which is, have you seen how jurisdictions are handling the valuation for project site, since they may not be able to use the assessor value for the entire parcel?
Most of them, we hope, are using the assessor's value, but if you can't use the assessor's value, then whatever you're comfortable with is acceptable to ecology.
So like,
I'm not answering a question. I'm not answering that question very well.
Yeah, like the airport example.
You could use the construction cost. You can use the construction cost as being the increased value, for example. So that on that airport, for example, the land where the hangar was being built was just a paved part of the taxiway, and so it had a value within that overall project area of some number that could be calculated, and the applicant should calculate that value. And then the second part would be what that land value is worth after the hangar's built. And they could calculate that value based on the cost to build the hangar, for example. So it really is up to the local jurisdiction to decide what they're comfortable with. I do encourage you to find a method that you like and stay with that method, and don't jump from method to method between developers, because there may be some games to be played on that.
The next question kind of ties in with that. It says, can you go into more detail on how you define the project site for the improvements value with redevelopment? Do local jurisdictions make a judgment call on the area being redeveloped versus counting the whole site?
The project site is the area that's being disturbed, and the site is the land that's owned the land is owned by by whoever owns the land. So and so the project site is the area that's being disturbed by that construction project. So the example I gave, the site is the airport boundaries that's owned by the port authority that owns that airport. The project site is the ground that gets dug up and repaved and built on. And there's the definition of site and project site are in the glossary in the manual.
Next question is, would you allow a soil test or sieve report on soils from septic design be used for drainage assessment?
If they've got a infiltration rate, yeah. There's a method for outwash soils where you can calculate the infiltration rate based on the percent passing several screens. It's a kind of an interesting equation, but that only applies to outwash soils. You can't use that for denser soils. But information from a septic tank designer is perfectly adequate for infiltration for stormwater.
And last one we've got up is, if the site is considered flow control exempt, do they still need to have a geotechnical evaluation? Asking for a friend.
If a site is flow control exempt, meaning that runoff from the site goes into man-made conveyance, goes into the MS4 and stays in the MS4 all the way to the water that is flow control exempt, then the requirements for minimum requirement number 5 are dispersion related and not infiltration related. So you do not need to worry about infiltration on that site. So the need for geotechnical analysis for stormwater reasons is not there. But geotechnical analysis for structural reasons, if you're building a good sized building, may still be there. Did I answer that one? Okay, why don't we take a break? I've talked for a little over an hour. I'm getting ready to go into another section where I'm going to actually discuss the 9 minimum requirements and how you get from one to the next.
We actually had 2 more pop up. If you can.
Okay. I got all the time in the world.
All right.
We do have a, let me mention something. We do have a windstorm going on around my house right now. And I'm out at the end of power lines. And so we occasionally lose power. So if I suddenly drop off the world, it's probably because my house has lost power. So don't be alarmed. I'll try to get back on as quick as I can.
All right. Explain dispersion requirements.
Dispersion. We want people to have water, rainfall that lands on hard surfaces, lands on a patio, for example. It's going to run off the patio and get on the grass. And we want the water to flow across the grass. And as it flows across the grass, it widens, its flow path widens out and it disperses across the grass and stays and doesn't go any further than the grass. That's dispersion. And if it's in a pipe and it comes out of the pipe, we want that to no longer be a single point source. We want that to go out on the grass and widen out again as well and disperse across the grass. So we have guidance on how to do sheet flow dispersion and point source dispersion in the manual, using if it's a point source, using a level spreader. So the water comes up on one side and backs up and flows over the top of the level spreader and goes across the grass. So we want people to do things under minimum required number 5, even if you're flow control exempt, because we want you to keep water on site as much as possible. So we're having you match the requirements from the 2009 manual. I think it's a 2009 manual. I can't remember the 2008, 2009 manual for minimum required number 5, which required dispersion. And I'll talk more about dispersion later on.
And then the last question, could you use the soil grain size analysis to determine infiltration and feasibility in lieu of smaller, large-scale pilot infiltration tests?
Again, the grain size analysis works on outwash soils, and outwash soils are all feasible. So using that analysis won't give you infeasibility, because it's, if you go back to the creation of that equation, that equation was created using soils that started at an infiltration rate of about 2 inches per hour and went up. And so it's only valid for that range of infiltration rates. So then to prove infeasibility, you're going to have to do some sort of a test on site, find tests on sites that are close by, or get a soils report, soils map that shows that the soils are completely bad. And the jurisdiction is going to have to agree with whatever you're coming up with. So some jurisdictions may accept soils maps and some may not. But the grain size analysis equation is not appropriate for showing infeasibility.
That wraps up our current open questions.
Okay, so I've got 10:07 on my clock. Why don't we come back at 10:20?
Sounds good. So the follow-up question is, for project site valuation, if an applicant is only impacting a portion of an airport building, for instance, one terminal, or as a different example, a store in a mall, do you draw the project site line for valuation only around that area of disturbance? If I understand correctly, you don't consider the value of the entire rather large building, just the section that is being demolished and reconstructed.
That is correct. That is correct. That's the project site. So on a mall property, for example, if you have a large mall with a large parking lot around it, and someone wants to take a part of that parking lot and build a new building on that parking lot to be a new store or a restaurant on that parking lot, that you look at the site, the area, the project site is the area that's disturbed for the construction of that new building, and the value you are comparing to is the value of that smaller sub area of the overall mall property. So you use the project site, which is the area that gets disturbed by the construction, as your starting value for the property and your comparative value for the property.
Great, thanks.
And that's a change from before. In the 2014 manual, we just used the term site, which was the entire land owned by the applicant. We wanted to break that down to the smaller piece. Okay, so now let's talk about, oops, I got to get my cursor on the right screen. So, okay, let's talk about the 9 minimum requirements. I've talked about what you have to do to determine which minimum requirement you have to deal with. Do you have to deal with minimum requirements 1 through 9? Do you have to deal with minimum requirements 1 through 5, or do you have to deal with only minimum requirements 1 and 2, depending upon the size of your project and whether it's new development or redevelopment, and whether you have to do whether you have to deal with replaced surface or only new surface or whatever. So we've covered those set of thresholds that are getting us there. Now let's talk about the 9 minimum requirements. And minimum requirement number 1 is to create a stormwater site plan, SSP. And the stormwater site plan is what's being produced here. It's the document that the applicant is producing to submit to the jurisdiction to tell them what they're proposing to do in terms of stormwater for the construction project that they are proposing to take on. And we have given you in the manual a suggested format for the stormwater site plan, but that is merely a suggestion. We do think that each jurisdiction should create their own format, whether it's an outline or a form that somebody fills in. I know that Anacortes has spent quite a bit of effort creating a form that the applicant has to fill in to so that they know they're getting all the information they need. And so I've looked at that, and I think that's a very nice form. There are others, but there's no one way of going about doing this. But we think you as a jurisdiction should create a form of some sort so that the developers and the applicants aren't creating their own and making it hard for you to find the information. We think you should create something of your own that identifies, so you know where you're going to find the information. You know where the WWHM output's going to be. You know where they're going to talk about thresholds. And in this, there needs to be information on the existing conditions, what's going on the site, where there are slopes, are there wells on the site, are there things that might not allow them to infiltrate, what's the topography, where's the water go now when it rains on the site and runs off from the site. All those things are needing to have in the stormwater site plan. And so the next 8 minimum requirements I'm going to talk about are all the filler into the stormwater site plan, all the things that have to get put in to make sure that they know what's going on. So minimum requirement number 2 is construction stormwater pollution prevention plan, construction SWP. And so it can be an attachment to the stormwater site plan, or it can be something in the stormwater site plan. But in any case, it needs to be maintained on site and updated during construction while the construction's going on. So if the contractor that's doing the work identifies that he needs to install silt fence in some new spot, that silt fence installation needs to be marked on a drawing of the site in red and identified that got put in. So that's all stuff that needs to get put in. All construction projects need this, not just those that require an ecology permit. Project sites that are 1 acre or larger require an ecology permit. They have to apply for it and pay for it. And there may be an ecology inspector coming out to the site. Sites less than 1 acre, but greater than 2,000 square feet, or even less than 2,000 square feet of new placed, have to do stormwater controls during construction. And so there's a need for a SWP. So a single family residence needs to do a construction SWP. They need to keep runoff from that property from going out into the street and getting into the MS4. Because all that's going to do is give you problems in your MS4, make it more difficult for you to actually maintain your facilities. There are 13 elements to the construction SWP, all spelled out in the construction permit, which when you're larger than 1 acre, you need to have meet the construction permit. Projects that are smaller than 2,000 square feet could have a mini SWP. Jurisdictions may, if they want, create smaller version of what this big SWIP is, and have people that are doing those single family homes follow that mini SWIP. That's something that can be done and is acceptable to ecology. But the elements of the construction SWIP deal with preserving vegetation and marking limits, creating construction access, and not only is it access, but it's also the area where people are leaving the site. So that's where all kinds of dirt on tires is going to be going out onto the streets. You need to control flow rates within the site and off the site. You need to control sediment. The construction permit is primarily dealing with turbidity, with dealing with sediment in the water leaving the site. So you need to be worried about the movement of soils. So you need to stabilize soils, need to protect slopes to make sure they don't go anywhere. Drain inlets that are off the site, so that there's drain inlets being built for that project in a subdivision. Those need to be protected from getting silt to them during construction. Or if it's off-site and water's draining off-site, the catch basins off-site need to have protection. The channels and outlets need to be stabilized so they don't erode. Controlling pollutants is some source control type things, making sure that if you have gas on site in tanks, that those tanks aren't leaking and you're controlling where the water is going. If you are having to do dewatering, if you have high groundwater and have to dewater, you need to be sending that dewatering water to a safe place, whether it goes and gets dispersed out on the property someplace, or it gets discharged to a collection system, the MS4. You need to deal with that water. The 11 and 12 are managing and maintaining your BMPs. So if you put them in up front and they fail, you got to rebuild them. And you need to manage the project to make sure that the BMPs for construction are in place before you start disturbing land upstream. And when we added minimum requirement number 5 in the 2014 manual, we added element number 13, which is to protect LID BMPs. So this really should read protect infiltration BMPs. So we don't want runoff, dirty runoff from the site to go into a area that's going to be an infiltration pond and get in that infiltration pond and sediment up that infiltration pond and remove the ability to infiltrate. So as part of these BMPs, it's the element 13 is to keep runoff from going to those infiltration BMPs until they're no longer as dirty. And after the fact, if you have let water get into the infiltration BMP, coming into that BMP and removing that sediment-laden soil that would be plugging things. We're worried about that, and we want to make sure that you don't hurt the ability to infiltrate into the ground if there is an ability to do that. Minimum requirement number 3 is source control. Source control is keeping rainfall and runoff away from pollutants. Gas stations have roofs over the pumps. When I was growing up here in Washington State in the late 1960s, I had a Volkswagen Bug that I'd love to drive around, and I'd fill it with gas every week. And I'd pull into the gas station, and in the wintertime, it would be raining here, and I'd look up and I'd say, it's really nice, the owners of that gas station, to build that roof for me so that I can stay dry while I'm pumping gas into my car. And then when I became a stormwater engineer, I realized that, no, that's not nice of them. That's a source control. That's something they have to do. That's a requirement for fueling stations, non-potable, non-moving fueling stations. They have to put a roof over the pumps. That's a applicable structural BMP. And so for source controls, we have a whole volume of source controls. Volume 4 is our source control volume, and it lists all kinds of different source controls. As I said earlier, we just added 17 more source controls to volume 4 in the 2014 manual, 2019 manual, excuse me. And those source controls come in 4 flavors. They come in applicable and recommended, and operational and structural. So operational source controls are things like sweeping, closing the lid on dumpsters so the rain doesn't go into the dumpster and flow through the garbage and come out the bottom in the old rusty bottom of that thing. Structural source controls are roofs, building a concrete curb around the above ground fuel storage tank that has a volume inside that curb that's equal to the volume of the fuel in the storage tank. So if that tank leaks or breaks, the fuel will just go down and stay behind that berm that's down below it. That's a structural. And applicable and recommended operational structural. So applicable is the term that's used in the industrial permit, and what it means is mandatory. So if you go through the source control BMPs, you'll see that these are the applicable source controls, which are ones that they have to install, they have to do. And the recommended ones are the ones where you think if the applicable ones aren't working, then you need to go further and provide this recommended. And so we have applicable operational and structural source controls for most of the BMPs, and we have a recommended operational and structural source controls. Now, source controls aren't needed on all projects. They are required for commercial and industrial projects, but they're not necessarily needed for single family projects. And we are defining single family projects as being fourplexes and smaller. So if you have a 6-unit apartment complex that's being built, that is identified as a commercial project. It's not a single family project. Therefore, it needs to apply source controls to the project. So source controls, volume 4, they are very specific. So if you have a apartment complex, then there's source controls to apply to apartment complex. There's source controls to apply to portable fueling facilities. There's source controls for paint facilities. There's source controls for areas with a large number of trucks. So a UPS building has a set of source controls that are specific to that. Minimum required number 4 is protect natural drainage systems. So we don't want water that's currently going to one basin or down one stream channel to go to another stream, a different stream channel. We don't want someone to go on site and regrade that site so the water goes a different direction. We want water to continue going the same direction, because if it's going into streams, there might be fish in those streams that need that water. And if we send the water someplace else, that water will no longer be in that stream. So you need to maintain drainage patterns on the site and discharge from the project site at the natural location. And we always have to add to the maximum extent practicable, because there may be cases where you can't do that. It's impossible to do that. And here's where threshold discharge areas come into play. And I'm going to talk about those in a second. And you need to look at off-site runoff that's flowing across the site. So that's where that topographic map of the site becomes important, because if there's runoff from off-site flowing onto your site, you need to deal with that runoff, either by bypassing it around your site, which you can do, collect it at the boundary and pipe it around the site and let it discharge downstream of you. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to put flow control on that. You don't have to do treatment on that. But if you allow it to come on your site and commingle with the runoff on your site, you now have to deal with that amount of runoff. You have to design the BMPs for the amount of water that's going to reach them. And if it's water that comes from off-site, flows onto your parking lot and gets collected along with the runoff that comes from rain on your parking lot, that BMP needs to be sized for that entire amount of water. So intercepting runoff coming on your site from elsewhere is important. It helps you to make your BMPs and your detention facilities a lot smaller. So let's talk about threshold discharge areas. We need to, minimum requirements number 4, 6, and 7 all deal with threshold discharge areas. So the leftmost one is this magenta square on the screen right now that says single TDA. The entire runoff from that site all flows to a single point where it discharges from the site. So there's a the low point is in the bottom center, and everything on that site drains towards the middle and then down to that site. That's a single TDA. So you now have one TDA for your project, and when you're looking at minimum requirements 6 and 7, you apply that to the entire project site. Well, what happens if you have a site with 2 discharges? It has a high point in the middle, and water drains away from the middle, and it leaves the site in 2 locations, one in the bottom left-hand corner and one in the bottom right-hand corner of this green square. And they go into these 2 separate discharge locations, whether it's the MS4 or a stream channel or whatever. It's discharging offsite into something, and those 2 somethings come back together within a quarter mile. So if you discharge into one catch basin of the storm of the MS4, and the MS4 follows that bottom line and goes to the other one, and there's another catch basin at the other end, and the bottom of that site is less than 1/4 inches long, you have 1 TDA. Even though you're discharging from the site in 2 different locations, they've come back together within a quarter mile, and the shorter one of those 2 is a quarter mile. So you could have one that rambles around for 3/4 of a mile and then comes back in, but if the shorter one is less than a quarter mile, then you only have 1 TDA, and you're working with 1 TDA in this project. Now on the right-hand side, we still have that, we have that ridge down the middle, that high point down the middle. Water leaves the site in 2 different locations, and it doesn't come back together. The water goes in the MS4 from one place, and it goes into a stream channel that goes in an entirely different direction off the other site. And 1/4 of a mile downstream in both cases, they are still separate. The runoff from the site is still separate in those 2 places. That gives you 2 TDAs. And when you're looking at minimum requirement number 6 and minimum requirement number 7, there are secondary thresholds beyond that 5,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface that apply by TDA. So you could have 8,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface on this project, and you could put 4,000 square feet of pollution generating impervious surface in TDA 1 and 4,000 square feet in TDA 2. There's your 8,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface. But because you only have 4,000 square feet of pollution generating impervious surface in TDA 1 and 4,000 square feet in TDA 2, you don't exceed the threshold for minimum required number 6 of 6 of 5,000 square feet of pollution generating impervious surface. So you don't have to do minimum requirement number 6 on either of those two TDAs. You only have 4,000 in each one. But if you broke it up so as you had 6,000 in TDA 2 and 2,000 in TDA 1, you would have to do minimum requirement number 6 on TDA 2 because you exceed the 5,000 square feet of pollution generating impervious surface in a TDA in TDA 2, but not in TDA number 1. So it's important to determine where the runoff leaves your project site and how quickly the runoff from your project site comes back together, because there are ramifications to that in minimum requirement number 4, minimum requirement number 6, and minimum requirement number 7, because they do things by TDA. So are there any questions on minimum requirements 1 through 4? I don't have a question slide, but I'll let people ask questions because we're going to be going into some more technical TDAs next. I want to get these first 4 taken care of. So I'm guessing there aren't any showing up, Diane.
It helps if I unmute myself. There are 2 questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
The first one is, how does ecology define TDAs with 2 discharges that both eventually drain to saltwater within 1/4 mile downstream?
If the drainage path they're in is man-made, and then that would be each of those TDAs would be flow control exempt. But the flow path has to be man-made in order to make it flow control exempt. You can't, you have to look at where your receiving water is. And if you're discharging off the site into 2 different streams, that's not flow control exempt, and you have to deal with the TDAs and the flow control and the treatment by TDA if they don't come back together within 1/4 mile. But if both of those discharge into the MS4 and the MS4 goes different directions from those 2 points and they don't come back together, but the MS4 then ultimately discharges into a flow control exempt water body, then both of those TDAs are flow control exempt. But they may not be treatment exempt.
All right. And question number 2, if the scenario is 2 piped discharges that don't connect within 1/4 mile, but they discharge into a natural drainage like a creek within 1/4 mile of each other, is that not a single TDA, or would it be considered 2?
They'd have to come back together before the 1/4 mile is over. So those 2 pipe discharges, if they don't come back together before 1/4 mile, then they're separate TDAs. It doesn't make any difference how quickly they come back together in that receiving water if it's beyond that 1/4 mile. So if you've put them into 2 pipe system, both of which are 1/4 mile long, and they haven't come back together within that range, you have 2 TDAs. And you just stop at that 1/4 mile boundary and don't look any further, unless you're looking for flow control exemptions. Then you have to go all the way to the receiving water. Any follow-up questions on those?
Nope, not so far.
Okay. We're just moving right along here. Okay. I want to talk about what I'm calling the technical MRs. Those first 4 didn't need an engineer to deal with. None of those have any kind of engineering calculations or engineering designs involved. And when we set up when we set the minimum requirements up originally, when ecology set the minimum requirements originally, we had minimum requirements 1 through 5, all being effectively non-technical and not needing any engineering calculations. And that's why we had minimum requirement 1 through 5 as being for smaller projects, so that people doing smaller projects didn't have to bring an engineer in. You know how expensive engineers are, and we didn't want to have to bring them in. But now that we have this more detail in minimum requirement number 5, there may or may not be a need for an engineer in minimum requirement number 5. But if you need to do minimum requirements 6, 7, 8, and 9, there will be a need for engineering calculations, and an engineer, a licensed engineer, will be involved in doing that work. It can't be done by a non-engineering person. So minimum requirement number 5, maybe yes, maybe no, but 6, 7, 8, and 9 do require engineers. What the phase 1 jurisdictions have done is they've created, they've done the engineering work ahead of time. They've run the model simulations ahead of time, and they've built pre-sized BMPs for projects that only have to do minimum requirements 1 through 5. So the person that's doing that design can use one of the pre-sized BMPs that ecology has already reviewed and approved. So there's no need for an engineer if they're using the pre-sized. So if they have less than 5,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface on their property, they can use the pre-sized and not have to bring an engineer in to work on it. So let's talk about minimum requirement number 5. I'm gonna spend quite a bit of time here. This is the new thing that came out in 2014. Still, people are still getting used to it, and I want to make sure people are they are familiar enough and are learning about it. So the primary reason for minimum requirement number 5, the on-site stormwater management minimum requirement, is that applicants employ on-site stormwater management BMPs to infiltrate, disperse, and retain stormwater runoff on-site to the extent feasible. And this is a definition that went through a number of iterations. It went through 2 committees that looked at it and worked on it. It went to the Pollution Control Hearings Board to get approved. So it's a fairly robust definition that a lot of people are agreeing with now. And so we want to follow that to the, as much as we can, or to the extent feasible. And in the permit, in the municipal stormwater permit, LID, this on-site stormwater management, is addressed in 3 different places on 3 levels. The first level is site and subdivision. And that's the level we're talking about right now. We're talking about projects that come into the jurisdiction that have a nexus with stormwater and need a stormwater site plan. They also deal with it in the new development codes. So the jurisdiction, the city council members, the county commissioners, the upper level stormwater managers have worked on creating development codes that bring in the requirements of the permit, so that your codes, your city codes, already include these requirements and are not stopping people from using LID, but are making it almost mandatory that they use LID in their submittals. And so you're reviewing these site and subdivision applications in light of your city or county codes. And lastly, we're looking at it on a watershed scale, where we're trying to find places within the watershed that we can enhance infiltration to protect the stream channels. That is not something that is done by an applicant. that's something that's done by the city or by a county to look at those kind of things. So you won't be reviewing watershed scale projects. You'll be reviewing site and subdivision type projects. So in order to meet that definition, we need to identify specific actions that applicants can take and reviewers can review against to show that the definition is being met by the applicant. And so we've developed two ways in which that can be done, two independent ways. They're, if you do one of them, you don't have to do the other one. And if you're unable to do one of them, if you're unable to do the list standard, you don't have to turn around and do the LID performance standard. You pick one or the other and you go through that one or the other in its entirety and come up with an answer. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to do things on individual properties that reduce the disruption of hydrologic activities in the stream channels and in terms of water quality. And we have two ways of going about doing that. One way we call the LID performance standard. And in order to meet that, you use the WWHM to look at 60 years of rainfall and see how that rainfall turns into runoff from the site. And the LID performance standard deals with very low, very small storms. It deals with storms that are from 8% of the 2-year storm to 50% of the 2-year storm. Very small, very frequent storm events. Our other alternative, if you can't meet the LID performance standard, and in order to meet the performance standard, you have to be able to infiltrate on your site quite well in order to meet that standard. And if you can't meet that standard, we don't want people to just ignore it. So we've created lists. And we've created two separate lists for the people that have to do 1 through 5 versus the people that have to do 1 through 9. And on those lists, we have 3 sub-lists that you have to look at and pick a BMP from that sub-list if it's feasible and apply it to the extent feasible. And then you're done with that. And our sub-lists have to deal with lawn and landscape, have to deal with roofs. We have impervious surfaces that are non-pollution generating, and other hard surfaces, which are hard surfaces that are pollution generating and aren't roofs. So let's talk about the performance standard first. So the LID performance standard, here's our technical definition of the LID performance standard, is to match post-development discharge durations to pre-developed durations from 8% of the 2-year flow to 50% of the 2-year flow. So those of you who are hydrologically oriented and remember the definition for minimum requirement number 7, minimum requirement number 7 is very similar to this, only it goes from 50% of the 2-year flow to the full 50-year flow, the bigger storm events. So the LID performance standard deals with the small storm events. The minimum requirement number 7 deals with the bigger storm events. And so let's look at that on a graph. Let's go to this graphically. So this is a graph that's created by WWHM. And WWHM takes 60 years of rainfall, 15-minute time steps. That's 60 years of rainfall. So 60 years times 365 days a year times 24 hours a day times 4 time steps per hour, 4 15-minute time steps per hour. And you get multi-billion time steps. And WWHM takes the pre-developed condition and calculates the runoff from the site and each of those 15-minute time steps. And it takes the post-development runoff from the site in those 15-minute time steps. It then sorts that runoff from highest to lowest and calculates the amount of time that that specific flow rate is exceeded. So if you take the maximum flow rate of that and you find out that that's exceeded 0% of the time. And then you take the next one and it's exceeded 1 over multi-million converted to percent of the time. And it works its way on down and down and down until it gets into this range of 10% of the time, 1% of the time, 0.1% of the time, 0.01% of the time. And it then plots that flow rate versus the percent exceeded on the graph. And the blue line is the pre-developed line, and the red line is the post-developed line. And in order to meet the LID performance standard, the red line has to be below the blue line between 8% of the 2-year storm and 50% of the 2-year storm. Well, we don't show those numbers on this graph, but 8% of the 2-year storm is about 10% of the time. So this note right here at 10%. So the flow rate at that 10% of 0.02 or 0.03 or something like that, if you look across to the y-axis, that flow rate is exceeded 10% of the time. So there's the flow is less than that 90% of the time. So we're getting the frequent storms here, the ones that are occurring a lot. We're getting those taken care of. And 50% of the 2-year storm is about the 1% state, a little bit more than 1% of the time. So that red line has to be below the blue line in order to meet the LID performance standard from the vertical line at the 10 to the vertical line at the 1. So we're getting very frequent low runoff quantity storms in this LID performance standard. And the flow control standard then takes over from 50% of the 2-year over to the full 50-year storm. So that's what's plotted here is both of them. And we wanted to have the applicants only have to use one model to look at both these cases. And so that's why we've done it this way, to look at both those cases. So if you can pass the LID performance standard, if what you're doing on site, the combination of BMPs and infiltration, treatment BMPs and infiltration, if you're doing that on site and can pass the LID performance standard, you've met minimum requirement number 5. But if you can't do that on site, you still have to do something in terms of minimum requirement number 5. So if you are required to do minimum requirements 1 through 5, meaning you have between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet of new or replaced hard surface on your project site, you only have to do 1 through 5. So you use list number 1, cleverly named list number 1. And remember, there's 3 sublists. And so sublist, lawn and landscape sublist for list number 1 is you need to use soil quality and depth BMP T5.13. And what that is all the land that's disturbed during construction, but you don't build on, you need to put soil of a certain quality and at a certain depth on all that land. Now you could use topsoil that you've removed and stockpiled and put back on, but you still need to do that. And we're asking them to do that because of for a couple of reasons. One is if you put that soil on, you're going to have more porosity. So on these small storms water's going to stay where it falls. It's going to get trapped in the porous holes in the soil, and it's not going to go anywhere in these real small storms. So you're not going to get any runoff. And secondly, by adding compost or organic materials, you're going to get a much better lawn. It's going to grow better, and a better grass is going to provide more treatment and more storage for the water for the rain that lands in those places. So lawn and landscaped areas, list number one is soil quality. Very few infeasibility criteria on this. I think the only infeasibility criteria has to be slopes greater than 20% or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. But you pretty much are going to have to do this on every project. The second sub list was roofs, non-pollution generating. And so now you need to consider these bulleted items in the order they're given. And if one is infeasible, you go to the next one. But if it's not infeasible, you must install it on your site. So let's talk about these ones. Bullet number one is full dispersion or downspout full infiltration. So downspout full infiltration, that BMP, is only feasible when you have outwash soils. Infiltration rates greater than, say, 2 inches per hour. And if your site doesn't have that infiltration rate, you can't do downspout full infiltration, so it's infeasible. Full dispersion is a very special BMP that we've created that says if you want to keep 60% of your property as a stormwater reception area and have no more than 10% of your property be impermeable, have impermeable surfacing, and you want to direct all your runoff to that 60% of your property, and you'll keep all your runoff on site, then you fully dispersed and you're done. You can take care of that. That's done. You've taken care of minimum requirement number 5 with that full dispersion. You've probably taken care of minimum requirements number 6 and 7 at the same time, but you certainly have got minimum requirement number 5. That is strictly a decision of the applicant. If the applicant doesn't want to do that, they don't have to. It's strictly their decision. So here we have our first bullet is a decision of the applicant. And if they decide they don't want to do it, then it's infeasible. And if you don't have outwash soils, downspout full infiltration is infeasible. Okay, take those off my list. I now go to the next bullet. The next bullet is rain gardens or bioretention. There's the BMP numbers. And if they are feasible, you then have to size these to be at least 5% of the area that's draining to them. Now the sizing, that 5% area, is at the overflow of the bioretention or rain garden, not the bottom. Now you have the bottom of the bioretention, and then it slopes up to the sides to have the bioretention media in it, 18 inches, and then probably 6 inches of ponding. And the area we're talking about there is the area at the ponding level, at the level of the overflow of the bioretention facility, not at the bottom. And then if those are infeasible, if you have high groundwater, you have low infiltration rate, you then have to go to downspout dispersion. And downspout dispersion is putting a splash block at the bottom of a downspout so that it spreads the water out over the patio, over the grass that it's going to drain on. And perforated stub out connections is a pipeline that connects the downspout to a pipe, to a collection pipe, but there are perforations in that stub out, and the water will go into the ground. Some water will go into the ground through those perforations. And now, to determine if it's feasible or not, Ecology built a set of what we call infeasibility criteria. It was easier and more understandable for us to identify cases where you could not do something rather than to try to identify cases where you can do something. So we created infeasibility criteria, and if any of the infeasibility criteria fits, that BMP is infeasible. So if you answer yes to any of those infeasibility criteria, you don't need to do that BMP. And here's some of the infeasibility criteria that's there. And as I said early on, you need to do a good land use. You need to look at the geotech information because you're going to need that information later on. Here's where we need that information. In order to say we have infiltration rate less than 0.3 inches per hour, we need to test it on the site. We need to know where the groundwater is. Okay, we need to know where our right-of-ways are. We need to know if there's potential erosion problems or slope failure problems. And a lot of these are based on zoning. In addition, we also have more criteria within 100 feet of a closed or active landfill on slopes greater than 8%, within certain areas with groundwater contamination, 100 feet of a drinking water well. There are somewhere between 3 and 5 pages of infeasibility criteria. And you need to go down through all of them to determine if you are indeed infeasible. And if the applicant answers no to every single one of those, then they have to put in bioretention or a rain garden to deal with runoff from the roof. And that has to be 5% of the area draining to it. So if you have a 2,000 square foot roof, you need to have a bioretention of 40 square feet. Pretty straightforward. Now the last sublist on our list, 1, is for other hard surfaces. Driveways, patios, parking lots, roadways, all those kind of good things. Again, you do what's in the order it's first listed. First listed is full dispersion. Again, that's the decision of the applicant, whether they want to do that or not. If they don't, it's infeasible. The second bullet is we've added permeable pavement to the second bullet. Permeable pavement, rain gardens, or bioretention. And if you're going to do rain gardens or bioretention, again, it has to be 5% of the area draining to it. If permeable pavement's feasible, you got to put permeable pavement everywhere it's feasible. So you got to put it on the road, you got to put it on the sidewalk, you got to put it on the patios, you got to put it on driveways. There's no minimum size requirement. You put it everywhere. Again, there's a whole bunch of infeasibility criteria. The ones in green here are the same as they are in for bioretention. So there's a lot of overlap on the infeasibility criteria between bioretention and permeable pavement. There is one here that a couple of them here that I need to point out, that we do have a limit to the amount of traffic that's going to be on that permeable pavement. If you have average daily traffic count, ADT, of less than 400, or of greater than 400, permeable pavement's infeasible. We only want you to install permeable pavement in places where there is low traffic. We don't want it on places, we don't want to force you to do it in places where there's lots of traffic. And minimum required number 5, doing to the list option, is essentially forcing people to install certain BMPs. And we don't want to force you to install bioretention on arterials or collectors. And because permeable pavement has not shown that it can meet our presumed criteria for TSS removal, by itself, just that 6 inches of permeable pavement, we know it removes dirt because you got to clean it, but we don't think it meets our criteria. Therefore, if you're going to put permeable pavement in, you've got to treat the water that goes through the permeable pavement. And you either do that by having the site suitability criteria met, percent organics, cation exchange capacity, maximum infiltration rate. You have to have those things work, or you can insert a 6-inch thick sand layer under the permeable pavement to act as a treatment layer. More infeasibility criteria for permeable pavement. I've got a couple of them here that I want to point out to you. The second row down, second one from the left, multi-level parking garages. You don't need to use permeable pavement at multi-level parking garages or on bridges. That's kind of ridiculous to do those. Where you're salting, industrial facilities, contaminated soil below the places. So there are some additional ones here beyond what are in there for the bioretention, but a lot of them are the same. And again, if you answer no to all the various different infeasibility criteria, you have to install permeable pavement. If I go back up to here, if permeable pavement, rain gardens, and bioretention are all infeasible, then you need to do flow dispersion. So you need to take runoff from the roadway or the patio and disperse it across grass. Or you need to collect water that's coming down from the roadway, from your driveway, and collect that and disperse it across grass. Sheet flow and concentrated flow dispersion. Those are situations where we've put those into the manual back in 2009, but we can't take them out in the next manual. That's called backsliding. So we had to keep them in, but we kept them in at the bottom of the lists so that they are still there, but hopefully you have a property that is going to do something on the higher up on the lists. Now, if you have to do minimum requirements 1 through 9, I was just telling you about minimum requirements 1 through 5. If you have to do 1 through 9, there's a list 2 that you're doing. And what are the changes? So it's the same as list 1, except rain gardens are no longer an option. If you have to do 1 through 9, you have to do treatment. And rain gardens aren't designed to give us a known amount of treatment. Bioretention does. We've done tests on the bioretention media. We know what kind of treatment we can get through the bioretention. We don't know what kind of treatment we can get through a rain garden, because a rain garden doesn't necessarily have the bioretention media in it. You can build a rain garden by scooping out the dirt, setting it aside, stirring it up a little bit with a little bit of compost, dumping it back in the hole, and planting plants. That's a rain garden. That's not bioretention. We don't know what kind of treatment we're going to get from that. So if you have to use list 2, that option is for bioretention only, not for bioretention or rain gardens. On the other hard surfaces, we've modified the order of the bullets. We've taken rain gardens out, but we've also made permeable pavement a second priority by itself and bioretention as a third priority. So now, instead of having a choice of those two, you have to eliminate permeable pavement as being infeasible before you go to bioretention as being feasible for minimum requirement number 5. So why are we doing this? You ask. Well, look at the ratio between the area where rain falls and the area where water infiltrates into the ground. In permeable pavement, that ratio is 1 to 1. Rain falls on the pavement and goes into the ground under the pavement. At worst, it's 2 to 1. We do allow run-on to permeable pavement equal to the area of the permeable pavement. So at worst, we have a ratio of 2 to 1. Rain falls on twice as much area as it has to infiltrate. Bioretention is 5% of the area draining to it. That ratio is 20 to 1. We want to get water into the ground. So we're asking people to use the BMP that does a better job at getting water into the ground before you use the one that doesn't do the good job. So to go through the list, those same 3 slides I just had once before, lawn and landscape, this hasn't changed. So now in the list number 2 for roofs, we only have bioretention as the second bullet. We have the same first bullet and same third and fourth bullets, no change. And list number 2, other hard surfaces, permeable pavement is the second bullet by itself, and bioretention is the third bullet by itself. And the fourth bullet is the same as it was before. Now, what happens if everything's infeasible? Everything on those lists is infeasible. You have high groundwater, you have contaminated soils, you're an industrial site and you don't have enough room to disperse water across grass because you don't have anything there. If everything's infeasible, you're done. You've met minimum requirement number 5. You don't have to do the list option. You picked the list option and you're done. You don't have to do the LID performance standard. If everything's infeasible, you're done. Now you have to cite the infeasibility criteria that you're using to show infeasibility. So in your stormwater site plan, there should be something that says, I can't do bioretention because I have my infiltration rate on my site is less than 0.3 inches per hour. And you can find that in the geotech report that I've attached. You can't just say, oh, it's infeasible, I'm done. Jurisdictions need to make sure that the applicants cite the specific infeasibility criteria they're using to show that it is indeed infeasible. Now, you're only done with minimum requirement number 5. If you had to do minimum requirements 1 through 9, you still have to do minimum requirement 6 and minimum requirement number 7. It was possible that doing the actions you needed to take to meet minimum requirement number 5, you could also meet minimum requirements number 6 and 7. You could build enough bioretention. You could put in enough permeable pavement with a sand layer under it that you could get 91% treatment and 100% infiltration just by doing the things you need to do to meet minimum requirement number 5. That is possible. Doesn't happen every time, but it is possible. But if they're infeasible and you're not installing anything for minimum requirement number 1 through 5, you still have to meet 6 and 7. And now if you're going, because minimum requirement number 5 deals with flows, it's not dealing with treatment, it's dealing with hydrology and flows. If you are going to a flow control exempt water body, we've created a list number 3. And list number 3 takes out all the bioretention and permeable pavement and all that kind of stuff, and just keeps in the stuff that was there in the 2009 manual, which we can't get rid of. We can't backslide. So we still have to have those dispersion BMPs in there. And we have the post-construction soil quality and depth for all the ground that was disturbed during construction, but not built in. So what specifically does ecology mean by infeasibility? When we are talking about infeasibility and minimum requirement number 5, we mean it's infeasible for the list option of minimum requirement number 5. We don't mean you can't build it. We don't mean that you just because bioretention is infeasible for minimum requirement number 5 doesn't mean you can't build it with an under drain to provide treatment for minimum requirement number 6. When ecology is talking about infeasibility for minimum requirement number 5, we are only talking about the fact that we're not forcing you to build it. In minimum requirement number 5, the list option, we are literally forcing you to build something that's feasible. You don't have a choice. But if you want to build it, even though it shows it being infeasible for some reason, such as a low infiltration rate, you can still build it on your site if you want to meet minimum requirement number 6. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. That's perfectly legitimate to do that. So again, I've hit a point where I don't have a question slide, but I finished talking about minimum requirement number 5. So there's a lot of stuff in that. So if people have questions on minimum requirement number 5, let's deal with those now.
All right, got 2 of them. Is full dispersion, list 1, feasible on poorly drained soils? How many test sites are required in the reserve area? Are any of the options from list 1 feasible on poorly drained soils?
They're all feasible on poorly drained soils. They all will have to, could potentially be used. You can, poorly drained soils, 0.3 inches per hour is the dividing line between B and C soils according to USGS. So 0.3 inches per hour is it's a pretty good infiltration rate. So you could be doing those. Full dispersion, we're not looking at infiltration and full dispersion. We're looking at water going out and having a large area to go to, taking runoff from 10 acres or 10% of the site and putting it out on 60% of the site. So that water should stay on site and it'll evaporate, evapotranspiration. It doesn't have to infiltrate on that 60% of the site in the full dispersion BMP. But poorly drained soils can be feasible under minimum requirements, minimum requirement number 5, list option, and the list option. I know of a project in Anacortes that they thought was poorly drained soils, but they had 0.5 inches per hour, and so they had to do minimum requirement number 5. They had to install bioretention for their minimum requirement.
And
so
the
hopefully I
second
answered
piece
that one. Okay.
says, to go along with this, can you achieve full dispersion in poorly drained soils by combining it with a UIC?
Sure. If you want to do that, but full dispersion, remember, full dispersion has a couple other caveats with it. You have to set that 60% of your site aside. It needs to be in the deed for that site that is a stormwater reserved area, and nothing can be built to that. If there's something is built to that, they got to do stormwater for the new building plus the area that was going into that site. So it's there for the so that it's been sized, that those ratios are there so that you shouldn't have to do anything other than just directing the water to that area. But if you want to add a UIC out in that area, go ahead. Just get it registered.
All right, and that was it for questions on this section.
Okay. So I've got to go through minimum requirements 6, 7, 8, and 9, which won't take me very long. And then I have example problems. So why don't we finish 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then take questions on that, and then take a break. Let me rest my voice and stop my stomach from growling, and come back after that with examples. How's that sound? Anyone have a complaint about that?
I don't.
Okay, let's boogie on past 11:30 here. Okay, so minimum requirement number 6 is runoff treatment. I've been alluding to and mentioning this additional threshold. So that first set of thresholds at 5,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface just gets you to the requirement to look at all 9 of them. Now when I'm on minimum requirement number 6, I have an additional threshold of 5,000 square feet of effective PGIS in a TDA. Okay, effective PGIS, pollution generating impervious surface in a TDA. So now we have 2 things that are restricting us, that are making this tighter. Okay, just because we have 5,000 square feet of new and replaced doesn't mean we're going to have 5,000 square feet of PGIS, because part of that original 5,000 square feet was a roof. So if we have a project that has 8,000 square feet again, and the project site is 1 TDA, and we have 8,000 square feet, and 5,000 of that is a building, and 3,000 of that is parking, we don't have to do minimum requirement number 6 because we haven't exceeded our 5,000 square foot of PGIS. We have to do minimum requirement number 5, and we'll have to put it bioretention or permeable pavement or whatever. But we don't have to do minimum requirement number 6. And also, if you're looking at TDAs, if 1 TDA has less than 5,000 square feet of PGIS, but the other one has more, you have to do treatment in the one that has more, but not in the one that has less. So this is something that you need to look at. The idea behind this is reduce pollutant loads, concentrations. We have a number of BMPs that we've identified in the manual. And if you design those in accordance with the design criteria in the BMP section, we presume that you are going to meet ecology's requirements for removal. We also have a number of manufactured treatment devices listed on the TAPE website, TAPE, Technology Assessment Protocol -ecology. For manufactured devices like Filterra and Storm Filter and the Kraken, which is a new one that's coming out, filter system. And so those have shown through field tests that they can meet our requirements. And under the permit, you must meet basic treatment for all sites. Every new and redevelopment site that exceeds the 5,000 square foot threshold, PGIS threshold, must do at least basic treatment. Now there are specific places where you have to do more. In areas where you have phosphorus sensitive water bodies, if you're discharging to that phosphorus sensitive water body, you have to do phosphorus treatment in addition to basic treatment. If you're discharging to a stream that may contain fish, you have to do enhanced treatment, metals treatment. You have to remove dissolved copper and zinc. We have BMPs in the manual that can do that. And in volume 3, there is a nice procedure to follow to select your BMPs, your treatment BMPs. It takes you down through, is oil control needed? Can we use infiltration to treat? Do we need to do phosphorus treatment? Do we need to do metals treatment? And lastly, I have to do basic treatment, so here's the BMPs I can use for that. Minimum requirement number 6. Minimum requirement number 7. This is the flow control minimum requirement. And it has a second threshold as well. And its second threshold here is 10,000 square feet of effective impervious surface in a TDA, or a 0.1 CFS increase in the 100-year flow frequency. It's that actually should now be a 0.15 CFS increase in the 15-minute time step of the 100-year flow frequency. And so those kind of go together, that 0.15 and the 10,000 square feet. It takes about 10,000 square feet of effective impervious surface to increase the flow by that 0.15 CFS. So those go together. And if you exceed either of those, you have to beat minimum requirement number 7. And these are by TDA again. So if I have 20,000 square feet of impervious surface on my property, and I have 2 TDAs, and one of them has 8,000 square feet, and one of them has 12,000 square feet, I have to do flow control on the 12,000 square foot TDA, but not the 8,000 square foot TDA. But I may have to do treatment on both of those if we have more than 5,000 square feet of pollution generating impervious surface. So it gets kind of crazy. Now you use a model, an extended simulation model like WWHM 2012 or MGS flood to analyze flow control on this process. And here we're looking at higher flows, bigger storms, the 50% of the 2-year to the full 50-year storms, things that are exceeded 1% of the time or less. So 99% of the storms are operating at flow rates less than this BMP looks at. This is taking the top 1% of flow rates in storms. It's taking the stuff off the peak. I've got another little example of TDAs here. I don't think I need to go over that again unless you want to ask a question at the end about that. And so if you look at the performance, LID performance standard versus the flow control standard, you have a dividing line between the two at the point of, at the 1%, about 1% exceeding point, 50% of the 2-year storm. So one of them is 50% of the 2-year storm and lower, down to 8% of the 2-year storm. And the other one is 50% of the 2-year storm and higher up to the full 50-year storm. So they work together in the same model, and they work together on the same graph. So if I was going to meet the LID performance standard and minimum required number 7, the entire red line on this graph would have to be below the blue line in order for me to meet both of those standards. Now it's possible to beat one and not the other. If you don't do any infiltration, you're probably not going to meet the LID standard. And if all you're doing is infiltration, you may not meet the flow control standard because your flows may bypass your bioretention if you're putting, that's what you got in place. So that's minimum required number 7. Minimum required number 8 is wetlands protection. You cannot use an existing wetland for stormwater treatment or flow control. You must have your BMPs outside of the wetland and the buffer for the wetland. There are some cases with low quality wetlands, category 3 and 4 wetlands, where you can use the buffer to help mitigate impacts on the wetland. But otherwise, you must have all your BMPs, your treatment BMPs and your flow control BMPs need to be outside the wetland and the wetland buffer. We're trying to ensure that wetlands are controlled and get protections, because wetlands are a valuable resource here in the state. And the way wetlands are judged is by changes in volume in those wetlands. Wetlands go up and down in volume based on rainfall and the lack of rainfall. And so we're asking people that are discharging to a wetland to make sure that the wetland is protected and not disturbed and not destroyed. And in some cases, this may mean that there's going to be a conflict between the detention that you do for minimum requirement number 7 or the infiltration you're doing on your site for minimum requirement number 7 and the health of that wetland. And so you may have to let some of the requirements for minimum requirement number 7 slide in order to maintain the wetland in its condition. Wetlands take priority over streams for these large storms, minimum requirement number 7. And there are a lot of additional guidelines in Appendix 1-D. As I said early on, there are 2 different tracks you can go down to meet the requirements for wetlands. You could use the modeling capabilities in WWHM to analyze the wetland. Or if you have access to the wetland and can create a stage storage discharge curve, you use a combination of WWHM and an Excel file to do this analysis. That's all much better explained in Appendix 1-D. I'm not going to get into it any deeper than I am right now. Minimum requirement number 9, if you have to install a BMP to meet minimum requirements 6 or 7, or even 5, you need to create an operation and maintenance manual, which is what goes in MR9. And you need to provide an O&M manual for all facilities and BMPs. And if you're installing a manufactured BMP, like a Filtera or a storm filter, you need to contact the manufacturer and get their O&M manual and have that included in this O&M manual. Now, if the facility is owned by a jurisdiction, it needs to be identified in the jurisdiction's O&M plan. If it's being owned by a private entity, the person responsible, the private entity that's responsible for maintaining that BMP should be identified in the O&M plan. And I've gone all the way along to here and I haven't talked at all about conveyance, except for identifying the MS4 and needing the MS4 to be in place all the way between a flow control exempt water body and a project site that thinks it's flow control exempt. So what's ecology say about conveyance? We don't care about conveyance. We're looking at water treatment and flow controls. So each jurisdiction can identify what they want as their criteria for conveyance. What size storm do you have to use? We don't address it in the manual. We also, you can't do it based on WWHM. WWHM gives you discharge at a specific point. It's usually discharge off site. If you're doing piping on site, you have a subdivision with streets and you want to do a collection system, you're going to have to model that yourself. That's going to have to be designed yourself. And there should be, as a jurisdiction, you should require some sort of analysis of the ability of that collection system to handle the runoff that's necessary. All kinds of methods to use it, rational methods, Santa Barbara unit hydrograph, TR55, TR20, HEC HMS, especially made spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, those all can work to deal with conveyance. Okay, questions?
We have one. Are there O&M requirements for minimum requirement 3 BMPs?
Yes, and those should be attached to minimum requirement number 3, not minimum requirement number 9. Because those maintenance requirements are listed in the source control BMP. So they're already there. You just have to make sure that they're actually doing them.
And that was it for
That's a
questions.
good question. No one's ever asked that question before. It's a good one. Thank you for asking that, whoever did. Pat yourself on the back. So before, so we're going to leave for lunch. And while you're at lunch, not to ruin your lunch, you may want to think if there's any questions, any other questions you may have. So yeah, the first two things I'm going to do after lunch are going to be a example problem of a single family residential property, 44 house subdivision on till soil. And what you need to do as you're going through the review and the minimum requirements and looking at the information that gets submitted and how that applies to things further down the line. So the second one I'm going to do is a same single family residential property, but on outwash, and how things change in your analysis and your review based on those two things. In the PowerPoint that I prepared and made a PDF of, I don't know, Diane, did you send that out to people? If not, we should be able to send it out to you later.
I attached it to the invite, but if people didn't get it, they can let me know and I'd be happy to send it again.
Okay. I did made some changes in the order of the slides in the example problems. But there are two more examples in there of a commercial property, redevelopment property, that I'm not going to go through out loud, but you can go through them and look at how I looked at them in a similar manner to I did the single family. And then there's one other thing I'm going to talk about, and that's a ability to trade treatment of existing surface and or replaced surface along a roadway for treatment from and so we could do treatment off of existing surface and not do treatment off of new pavement as a trade, and how that could be done, and how you can do that in a site development as well. So two example problems, and there's one last piece, and I think that'll be about an hour and a half worth of time. So we should get done well before 3 o'clock. So if we take a break now, do we want a half hour? Do we want 45 minutes? What are you thinking, Diane?
I say let's go with 45 minutes.
Okay,
and I'll get the slides sent out to everyone again via email instead of attaching it to the invite this time.
Okay, I will, then we'll get back at 12:30. That's 45 minutes from now, right? 12:30. So
on the example problem. So welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch. It's on different than having something in person where we have to all leave to go get lunch. Now all we have to do is go in their kitchen and do something. So that made things nice. All of us at Ecology have been kicked out of the building since March. So everyone is working at home. There's a few people allowed in the building. And with the latest changes that the governor has been proposing, it's going to be even fewer people in the buildings. It's kind of exciting. So I've got a single family residential project on till soil. We're going to be this is going to be a submittal to a jurisdiction to review. So let's work our way through this thing. So review steps, I'll bring these back out again. So a description of the field work, then identify the minimum requirements, and then apply those minimum requirements. So it's fairly straightforward little process. So let's talk about the general project conditions. These are all assumptions I'm making for this project, but they're all things that you should have in your projects that are coming into you, similar things like this. So this project discharges directly to the MS4. So as you leave the site, you're going into a pipeline out the street where it discharges the MS4. It's inside the UGA. That has import in that if projects on 5 acres or more outside the UGA can't use the list option. They must use the LID performance standard. So inside the UGA, I have a choice of the list option or the performance standard for requirement number 5. Project site's 10 acres. Slopes are less than 5%, so that's fairly gentle property. The slopes change, but they're all less than 5%. No existing impervious area, so I'm on a new development project. I'm not a redevelopment project, so I need to follow the new development rules. And a lot of jurisdictions allow new developments to utilize the right-of-way or on-site runoff treatment and disposal. So outside there's a roadway with a curb, and then you might have a ditch or something behind that, or no curb and going into a ditch. And a lot of jurisdictions will allow the applicants to use that area for stormwater controls. In this case, I'm assuming that you can't, that you have to do everything within the 10 acres, and then you go outside those 10 acres. So here I have zoning code and city standards for my project. I've got a maximum density of 44 units on 10 acres. I've got setbacks and building area allowed. So that the table B1 identifies the setbacks and areas that I'm allowed, zoning, minimum density, and that kind of stuff. Of roads, I want to make as narrow as the fire code will allow. I'm going to have 2 sidewalks on my road. I want this to be a pedestrian-friendly subdivision, so I'm putting 2 sidewalks in, and I'm allowing a parking lane on only one side of the road. So 2 roads, 2 lanes for people, for cars to travel, sidewalks on both sides, and a parking lane in the road. So my street width is going to be 28 feet, 2 10-foot travel lanes and an 8-foot parking lane. And I got 2 sidewalks on each side, a planting strip and a curb and gutter to fill my 50-foot right-of-way within my subdivision. And so I'm laying out the subdivision looking something like this. Very straightforward subdivision with 2 entrances, cross street, and my 44 lots are all located within this subdivision. They're all trying to average them around 7,500. You can see there's a couple of them that are in the 11,000 square foot, but they're kind of weird subdivisions with a strange entrance way that's going to lose building property area. And so now I've had my geotechnical people go out to the site, and they've done the thing that they need to do, and they've determined that the infiltration rate on the site measured in the field, infiltration rate is about 0.3 of an inch per hour, 0.3 inches per hour chill soils. And they did some additional tests, and they found that the existing soil meets the site suitability criteria. They tested the soil and found that there was a 5 mega equivalents per gram of soil for cation exchange capacity. And they also found that there is adequate compost in the soil, organics in the soil to meet the site suitability criteria that's listed there. And because the infiltration rate's 0.3, it is low enough, so the water will not go through the soil so fast that it won't have time to come in contact with the organics or the cation exchange capacity. And depth of groundwater, they did drillings and they found it, they stopped at 15 feet and found no indication of groundwater within that 15 feet. So I've got more than 15 feet from below ground surface. And so I now have to calculate based on the amount of tests that were done and the type of test that was done and how well that test covered the surface of the area. I have to make an adjustment for my infiltration factor to account for those factors. And we have to make it smaller because of those factors. And so by putting those factors together, the number of site tests and what kind of site tests and that kind of stuff, I came up with a correction factor of 0.64. So all the simulations I'm going to run in my analysis should be multiplied. We should multiply the infiltration rate 0.3 times 0.64 to get the long-term infiltration rate that we're going to have for this project site. And all of this kind of information should come from a geotechnical report. The geotechnical engineer can calculate the correction factor, and we'll measure the infiltration rates, and we'll look at the soil to determine if it meets the site suitability. So this is all stuff that a geotech engineer or soil scientist should be able to produce and prepare for you. And this is all information you're going to need as you work your way through the project, getting further in. And so let's look at a single property. So I've got, here's an example for a property. So the lot size is 7,500 square feet. My building area is 2,579. That's 35% of the site. I've got a 1 foot overhang on my roof outside, so that gives me a roof of 2,820 square feet. My driveway, I'm just making an assumption. I got 44 of these, so I can. Some are going to be larger, some are going to be smaller, but I'm saying I'm going to average them out to 462 square feet based on a width and a length of the driveways. I'm also adding another 145 square feet for sidewalks and paths, and that leaves a landscaped area of 4,073 square feet and a total hard surface of 3,427 square feet for each property that I'm proposing to put on this site. Now, when you're running WWHM, you don't have to run each property independently, and you don't have to know the exact size and shape of the buildings. You really can combine all the roofs together and make it one roof in WWHM. You can combine all the driveways together and make it one driveway. It's like you're combining all the roadways together and all the sidewalks together. So you only need to set up a typical single family plan, and then get your numbers from that, and then multiply that times the number of properties you're going to be dealing with. So now I've got my information. I know what they're doing. I know what the subdivision looks like. I have information on where the water drained before, and existing, and what it's doing now, what they're proposing to have it, where they're proposing to have it go, where the roads are, how many houses are going to be, how much impervious surface on average we expect to have on each property. And so we're in pretty good shape here. And so now we're going to move to the next step and identify the minimum requirements. So the first thing you need to do to identify the minimum requirements is get your numbers of areas. How much new and replaced impervious surface you have, and what's going on. And so I'm taking from that previous table. I've got my per lot numbers here of landscaping and rooftops and fire retention, sidewalks and paths. I'm going to multiply those each by my 44 lots to get a. Excuse me, I got a cough here. Had to go on mute so I could cough and not knock all you guys' headsets off. And so I now have my project site totals. I can add all of them up, and I have area my right away I down at the bottom, and I have area set aside for a pond. I just kind of put some area together and said, let's make the pond about this size, just to hold place for that. But you don't use the pond when you're looking at your pond area, when you're looking at your new and replaced materials, hard surfaces. You don't include a pond in that, but you do include a pond in your calculations when you're actually running WWHM. So I needed that information for WWHM. And because WWHM does everything in acres, I converted them all these numbers to acres. And I can clearly see that when I add these up and massage them a little bit, I clearly see that I have I exceed the general threat. I have more than 5 acres, or 5,000 square feet of new and replaced hard surface. I have more than 5,000 square feet of effective pollution generating impervious surface. And I have more than 10,000 square feet of effective impervious surface. So not only do I have to do all 9 minimum requirements, I'm going to probably have to do 6 and 7. And if we want to go to the flow chart, which is going to be very simple, you start here. I have less than 35%. So my answer is no. I had more than 5,000 square feet. My answer is yes. And so I have to do all minimum requirements applying to the new project surfaces. Pretty straightforward. So I got to do all 9 of them. And the thresholds for minimum requirements 6 and 7 have been exceeded. I don't have to establish that until I get to 6 and 7 when I do my analysis, but let's look at it right now. And I don't have a wetland within a quarter mile downstream of my site, so I don't have to worry about minimum requirement number 8, but I have to do 1 through 7 and 9. And so I'll start applying them to the zone. Excuse me, I'm going to cough again. Okay, I'll try again. Normally I can just cover my mouth, but I got a microphone right next to it, so it makes it tough. So minimum requirement number 2, we've already, we know we're gonna have to produce a stormwater site plan, and so I'm building up the stormwater site plan. So in minimum requirement number 2, I'm setting out where I'm gonna be doing things. I'm phasing my excavation as I'm working my around the sites. I'm gonna build a temporary sediment pond and drain all the runoff from the site to that sediment pond. I'm going to let the water leave that sediment pond slowly and go into the MS4, which is at that point. I got some drain inlets out in the street that I'm protecting, so I won't get those full of silt as I'm doing it. I put a silt fence along the southern portion of the site. And since I'm not building on the properties, I haven't cleared those properties. I want to come in and clear where the road's going to go. So I'm now clearing where the road's going to go. And any place I do clear while I'm doing the roads, I'm going to be putting temporary soil stabilization and put some seeding there. Plus, I'm also creating a stabilized construction entrance. So that center area is going to be a laydown area that'll stabilize and make sure it stays good. So I'm going. So here's my stormwater pollution prevention plan for minimum requirement number 2, as I'm putting it together. Now, some people will produce the SWP with the design, and the design engineer will produce a SWP. Others will put in their bid specs, they'll put a line item in there for the contractor to produce the SWP. Ecology is okay with either of those processes, as long as the SWP gets produced. Jurisdictions have to deal with that, unfortunately. If the SWP isn't submitted with the original packet, they need to make sure that the SWP gets submitted from the contractor prior to the contractor going out and starting a new building. So there's some record keeping you're going to have to do to make sure that you're keeping track of all of the stuff that's going on. You want to make sure that takes place. Minimum requirement number 3, volume 4 addresses minimum requirement number 3, source controls. But remember, those are only for commercial and industrial sites. So we're dealing with that from the perspective of commercial and industrial sites, and this is single family, so we don't have to worry about source control on this project. I'd suggest if you are putting in a standard template for applicants to use for their submittals to you, I suggest that you do have a place in there for minimum requirement number 3, and just have a checkbox if they are single family residential, and but have places in there, spaces in there for them to put in this source controls that they're proposing to use in the if they are doing a commercial or industrial site. Mineral requirement number 4 is maintaining the same flow rates, maintain the same flow patterns, and water leaves the site. If this is north is up on this one, water leaves the site from in the southwest corner currently, and we're going to have it leave the site in the southwest corner in the future, so we're maintaining that. The other thing we need to worry about is what's happening on our borders. So if the water's leaving the site in the southwest corner, that could mean that water could be coming on our site from the north and west. If we're not up at the top of the hill, if we're on some part of the slope, we could be having water come on our site from neighboring properties. And we need to deal with that. We either need to let it come onto our site and then collect it in our collection system and direct it to our treatment and flow control, or we need to go out there and intercept it somehow. So if we wanted to build an interceptive trench or some sort of way of stopping the water from flowing across the property boundary on the eastern end of properties 15 through 22 and the northern side of the 9 through 15, and collect that and then direct that around and put it back in the MS4 so it goes on to the MS4 like it was, that is perfectly okay. If you don't do that, you may have to worry about oversizing your BMPs and your flow control detention pond if you're putting one in. So now let's look at let's get involved in the technical side of this. So first question, you need to start asking some questions about mineral requirement number 5 before you start putting mineral 5 together. So first of all, is the LID performance standard required? And I said that that's required on projects that are outside the UGA and are on 4 acres or larger. So if you are on a project outside the UGA on 5 acres or larger, then you must do the LID performance standard. The list option doesn't count. King County has done some pre-sizing for properties that are outside the UGA and on 5 acres or more. They've done some sizing of bioretention that meets the LID performance standard. Bioretention is larger than the 5% we're asking for in the list option. And so the people can meet the LID performance standard without having to run the model, because King County has already run the model and identified how big the BMPs need to be based on how much area is draining to that BMP. They can size it, and the size they built it will meet the performance standard. So there is a way of dealing with without having to get an engineer involved on these properties, but it takes some effort on the jurisdiction's part. Then if they don't have to do the performance standard, are they using the list or the performance standard? And if they're using the list, then did they evaluate the feasibility criteria properly, correctly? Did they cite, if they said something is feasible, did they cite something that shows it's infeasible and back that up with some sort of information about the site? And then what BMPs are they proposing and how are they sized? Are they sized correctly? If you're sizing it to be 5%, are you using the overflow or using the bottom to be that 5%? So let's go through this is 1 through 9. We need mineral requirements 1 through 9. So we need to do list 2. So let's go through the sub list of list 2. And so the first item on that is lawn and landscape. And we have to do soil quality and depth. And there's nothing infeasible about that, so we're going to do soil quality and depth. On roofs, we're going to consider these things now. Full dispersion or downspout full infiltration. I don't have enough area for full dispersion, so I don't want to do full dispersion, so I don't have to. And downspout full infiltration, it's infeasible if you're not on outwash soils. And we're not on outwash soils. We've got an infiltration rate of 0.3 inches per hour. So that's infeasible. So let's go down to the next one, bioretention. And we're looking at bioretention now. And is it infeasible? Well, the big things for infeasibility on bioretention are contaminated soils, they are steep slopes, they are wells, they are infiltration rate, and they are depth of groundwater. There are others, but those are the primary ones that will get you right away as being infeasible. And we answer no to all those. We are not infeasible for infiltration rate, for depth of groundwater, contaminated soils on the site. So we have to do bioretention. And we must do bioretention for every roof in the subdivision on the property of that property. Or if we want to, we can put one bioretention facility for several properties, size it for several roofs, and then pipe water to them from those roofs, if we wanted to do that. We don't have to, but we at a minimum, we have to have bioretention equal to 5% of the roof area, this entire project site. And now, so we've set aside, we've gone over and put a sign on the wall. So lawn and landscape, we're doing soil quality and depth, and for roofs, we're doing bioretention. And now we're doing continuing list 2, and for other hard surfaces, and we're not doing full dispersion. And the next item on the list is permeable pavement. Now, is permeable pavement feasible? Well, most of the things that make bioretention infeasible also make permeable pavement infeasible. And the converse of that, the things that make them feasible, make them both feasible. So bioretention is feasible. Permeable pavement is typically feasible as well. You need to look at the ability of the existing soils to treat, and site suitability criteria is there. So I don't have that infeasibility. I'm not building a parking garage. This roadway, this 44 properties, I probably won't have more than 400 ADT. Well, it might be close, but it's going to be less than 400 probably. We're not going to have 9 trips for every house, 9 trip ins every day for every house. I don't think so. It's probably not going to be 400. And so we can do permeable pavement. That has to be done. We don't go to bioretention. We don't have to go down the list to the next one. We've identified what we want. So now we're going to stick up on the wall. For other hard surfaces, we're going to do permeable pavement. So here's what we're going to do to meet minimum requirement number 5. Soil quality and depth. So we're going to put the soil on all the land that's disturbed but not built on. The land stuff's going to be landscaped. For the roofs, we're going to do bioretention. And for the other hard surfaces, we're going to do permeable pavement. So here's what we're going to have to come up with. On-site list. So BMPT 5.13, soil quality and depth. We're going to have 141 square feet of bioretention on each site. That's 5% of the roof area at 2820. We're going to have permeable pavement driveways. And we're going to have permeable pavement roadways. But on site, we're doing permeable pavement driveways. Any excess runoff is going to get collected on the property boundary by the road. And so it's going to, if there's overflow on the property, it's going to go out in the road, and that's going to get taken care of by what we're going to do for the full subdivision. And so on project-wide, we need to have permeable pavement roadways, the third item down here, because that was feasible under minimum requirement number 5. So the roadways now have to be permeable pavement. The sidewalks have to be permeable pavement because those are other hard surfaces. They need to be permeable pavement. And now, because I'm not taking care of all my runoff, my bioretention probably isn't big enough to handle all the runoff I need, all the treatment I need. I may have to have some other treatment added on. If I do, I'm going to build a combination wet pond detention pond to do that extra bit. And we find that out when we run WWHM. We can run WWHM and just put in the BMPs that we need to have for the minimum requirement number 5. And then we look to see, does that get us minimum requirement number 6 and minimum requirement number 7? So if it doesn't, we have to add some sort of treatment in addition, and flow control in addition. So on my sites, so every site's going to have a, and it's not going to necessarily be in this spot, but I'm putting a typical drawing together so that whoever's laying out the buildings, the homes that get built in the subdivision, they have a place to look to see what has to be done from a stormwater perspective. So this drawing shows I have to have a bioretention facility, and that bioretention facility should be at least 141 square feet at overflow. My driveway is permeable pavement, and I'm putting soil quality and depth on the rest of the property that gets disturbed that isn't built on. And down here at the bottom, I have the sidewalk going by. And then if I need to, I've got it set up so that I'm going to drain everything to the southwest, and build a wet detention pond, however big it has to be. I've taken up 4 lots here, which is a lot of area. And I don't think I need that big an area, but I'm setting it aside just in case. I don't need it, then they can build on the lots I don't use. So I've created this little figure here to help me with my WWHM analysis. So I've got the things that are going on in the parcel. I got things that are going on in the right of way, and I have things that are going on in terms of a centralized treatment facility of some sort. If I need them, that centralized treatment facility, I don't know. And so in my parcel, I have permeable pavement driveways, and each one is so many square feet, and I have 44 of them, so I have 0.467 acres. And I have 2.84 acres of roof, and that roof goes to bioretention. That's 0.142 acres. And then overflow for that bioretention, if that overflow if more water comes at bioretention than it can infiltrate, I'm going to overflow onto my lawn. And if it overflows off that lawn, it's going to overflow onto the sidewalk. And then overflows from that go on, that's permeable pavement, and overflows from that go on a lawn that's in between the sidewalk and the roadway. And the roadway itself is permeable pavement. And then there's an overflow perspective. If that permeable pavement can't handle all that runoff coming to it, all the overflows from everybody else, it's going to have to go into some sort of combined facility. And that 0.263 acres there, that's that square footage, I assume, for the pond size. Okay, so I've identified what I need for minimum requirement number 5. I've identified that I may need something more to meet minimum requirements number 6 and 7. And I'm putting that into my model. And so now to make sure to see what sizes I have, see if I've got the right sizes, are they big, are they small, whatever's going on, I need to start running WWHM. And so here's my WWHM input file. I got my roof runoff going to bioretention, and the overflow from that's going out to this wet detention pond. The landscaping on the properties, home sites, it overflows, goes to the wet detention pond. The driveways, same thing, and the streets and the sidewalks, they all end up in that wet detention pond. So that's my point of compliance. And so I need to make sure I've got all the treatment I need at that point. And I need to make sure I've got all the flow control I need at that point. So I'm going to run the model, and I'm going to get and do stuff, and I'm going to get it output. So I'm going to run it over and over again as a design engineer. I'm going to be trying different sizes and whatnot. So I finally came up with my final sizing, and I've completed all my final sizing. And you can get a report in WWHM. And what I'm going to be showing you is the PDF report. And that it's checked here for draft with this picture. All that check mark on for draft does is put a watermark of draft on your output. If you uncheck that, it leaves the watermark off. And if you put that, click it for draft, you get the watermark. So let's walk through that output, because that is what the reviewer is going to have to look at to determine if this is meeting the requirements and how big things are and what's going on. So my first step is I've got a name for the project, and I did this clear back in 2016, and it was for a class I was going to do in Anacortes, as a matter of fact. And so I used the Burlington gauge, 15-minute time step, and that precipitation scale means for the point where I put this project in Anacortes, you have to take the rainfall at the Burlington gauge and multiply it times 0.83 to get the rainfall you would actually see at this point. And that is done automatically internally when you bring up WWHM and you select the county that you're in, and you click on the point where you want the project to be. That finds the gauge and finds the precipitation scale. It then looks at the various different other pieces and brings those in, the start date for the data, the end date, what version of the manual or the model I'm using, and so forth. So that's the first thing that's going to come up. Second thing is going to be pre-developed land. And in nearly every case, pre-developed needs to be forest. It can be a moderate slope, it can be a flat slope, it can be a high slope, depending upon what you have. Manual has some, WWHM has some guidance as to what they mean by moderate, what slopes are moderate, what slopes are flat, and so forth. And all this ends up going to interflow, trapezoidal pond, and groundwater. So it identifies where it flows to. So it flows when it runs off from pre-developed, it just goes into interflow and in the streams. And now I'm starting to pick up the pieces that I entered. So I've got C lawn, moderate slope. I'm somewhere between 2 and 5%. That's moderate. I have 3.972 acres, and this flows to the pond. So runoff, anything that doesn't infiltrate here or stay there because of the low storms and the fact that we put soil quality and depth on the site, this C lawn it does reduce the amount of volume that so the amount the volume of rain that falls doesn't all run off. Some of it stays. And so this is allowing stuff to stay, but it still gets into the pond. And now my next one is roofs. I don't have real high peak roofs, so I'm calling them flat. Here's my area. And so it's going to go to surface retention number 1. So any runoff from the roof is going to go into surface retention 1. And surface retention 1 is this bioretention facility that's identified here. And I've taken the 44 bioretention facilities, 144 square feet, 141 square feet each, and multiplied them and come up with a square footage, and then took the square root of that and came up with a bioretention facility that was 79 feet by 79 feet. And I made my slopes, my side slopes, 0. So this is the area at the overflow. This is the area at the overflow. I didn't have to calculate a different bottom width and then bring the slopes up at strange angles. I can do it directly this way. And my first layer is Stormwater Manual 12-inch per hour. That's bioretention soil media. And it needs to be 1.5 feet thick, 18 inches. And then I have a 1.5 foot of sand below that, and then nothing below that. There's my infiltration rate, my factor. And the model shows me the acre feet of water that was infiltrated into the ground from that bioretention facility. So the runoff from the roof went in the bioretention facility, and 286 acre feet over the 60-year pattern infiltrated, yet almost 24 acre feet bypassed it, went to the riser. Couldn't infiltrate fast enough and it overflowed, went over the overflow pipe and just out from under the bioretention facility and away. So we ended up infiltrating 92.3%. And then I had precipitation on the facility and it evaporated off the facility as well. So this is an open pond, so it's going to sit there and have water land on it. So you need to make allowances for those areas when you're setting up your areas of various different things they're driving to them. The next piece was pavement, driveways. And I took the acreage that I needed to have for the 44 sites, assumed it was 30 feet wide, and calculated how long it had to be. And I have the same infiltration rate, the factor, and it infiltrated 100%. No problem from the driveways. And then the streets and sidewalks. I did the same thing, measured the streets and sidewalks, and went to all this effort. And again, the permeable pavement infiltrated everything. But I still have that 23 acre feet that bypassed the bioretention facility that I put into a pipe that took me to the ponds. I didn't take it to street, I took it to a pipe that took me to the ponds. So now I've created a wet pond below a detention pond. So my wet pond is 68 feet by 68, 2.5 feet deep, 3-1 side slopes, gives me a bottom of my trapezoidal detention pond of 83 by 83. So I'm defining a pond that I'm going to build. And I don't have to have the exact dimensions. I just need to have the stage storage discharge curve that's correct. So I need to have the change in elevation and the change in volume that happens with my change in elevation. I need to have those go together. And I did a bunch of different simulations based on all these pond sizes. And I ended up with something that looks like this. So this has been required number 7. Notice that it stops at 1%. Okay, that's 50% of the 2-year storm. I'm not looking over here between 1 and 10 for the LID performance standard. I'm only looking at the required number 7 issues. So by putting that pond in there, I was able to get the flow control to match. And this is a LID table that comes up for you. And if you notice down at the bottom, it says compliance with LID standard. It says it failed. So we didn't meet the LID standard with this design. But we did meet requirement number 5 by installing all the various different committee list options. And then I hit the water quality analysis button, and it shows me that I needed to have a volume in my wet pond because I didn't treat 100% of the water. I got 23 acre feet of water coming in, bypassed the treatment in the bioretention facility. I still have to treat it. So my wet pond needs to be about 1/4 of an acre foot in volume. It needs to meet that 6-month storm. So that's how I determined how deep that pond had to be and how big that pond, the wet pond had to be underneath. Now, if I took the pond out, I eliminated the pond and everything else is the same. I took the pond out. I didn't notice the flow duration curve, the top one on the left. I failed. I needed that detention pond. That 23 acre feet out of that 280 something that came in, that 23 that bypassed were real big storms. And they had water going out without detention that messed things up dramatically. Without detention. And if you look over here in the bottom, that's the LID performance, and that failed as well, the real small storms. And so here's that original combined wet detention ponds. Now, if instead of making them a combined wet pond and detention pond, I made them a separate wet pond and infiltration pond, because I can't be an infiltration pond if I need to have the wet pond, and I have a very low infiltration rate here, right, 0.3 inches per hour. But if I did go out there and make them a combination of a separate wet pond or separate BMP of some sort and an infiltration pond, I ran those through the WWHM, I got a great, for that same size pond, I got a big improvement on my flow control, and I met the LID performance standard. I ended up infiltrating everything. That met the LID performance standard. So when these designs are being done, and if you're a design engineer designing these things, don't stop with the answer you get as you're working your way through. Try some different things. Try making the bioretention that you're having to do in mineral kind number 5 a little bit larger. And that for a less will bypass. Try to figure out how to infiltrate, even if you have low infiltration, try to figure out how you can get a infiltration pond to work. Where I live here in the Olympia area, I'm surrounded by infiltration ponds. The soils are pretty good here, and we're surrounded by infiltration ponds, but with the amount of rain we've had recently, there's still standing water in those infiltration ponds. So that's what we're dealing with here. But if you can infiltrate it, that's always better. And then I could make these ponds smaller. Now that I have this analysis here, I can come in and make the pond smaller and still meet the flow duration and the LID performance. So things to do while you're at the end, when they finally come up with something, look for the appropriate BMP. Make sure they're using a BMP that treats what needs to be treated. If they're in a phosphorus sensitive water body, make sure they got a phosphorus treatment BMP. Go to volume 5 to get the design criteria. Look for and make sure you have the correct design criteria for the various places. And make sure that the facilities have been designed with those criteria. And then outside of meeting the minimum requirements in the BMPs, look at conveyance. They said that they have big enough pipes to handle the design storm that you have in place for your community, whether it's a 25-year or 50-year or whatever. Are there potential maintenance issues with what they've done? They design a roadway to get down to the bottom of the detention pond, a ramp. You get down to clean the detention pond. Can you get access to clean the detention pond? And if they're designing offline BMPs, if they're designing something that is sized based on offline criteria, which is a lower flow rate, is the splitter box that they're using to create that offline BMP adequately designed and sized? Additional things you need to look at, and also look to see if there's wetlands out there in the world. So, questions?
Let's see. We've got, are you still allowed to model BMP 513 areas as pasture instead of lawn?
That's a good question. I think it depends upon if you're going to be landscaping it, you probably should use lawn. If you're going to leave it as more native vegetation, you can probably use pasture. But that's a question that the local jurisdiction will have to accept. ecology would probably accept it either way.
That was the only question in the Q&A box.
Wow. Either I'm totally snowing them, or I'm doing a remarkable job of transferring information from person to person. One or the other, if they're not asking questions. We've had a real nice, I've been watching out the window. We have a nice big window from where I'm standing. And during the day today, I've had a massive windstorm, knocking branches off my trees, landing on my house. Then I had bright sunshine. And then a shortly time thereafter, I had a real downpour. So I've been experiencing Washington weather today.
We are up here in Anacortes also.
Yeah, been exciting. It's not windy right now. That's good. I'm not afraid that I'm going to lose my power. So let's do the same project. I'll go through it a bit faster. Let's do the same project. But now I'm on outwash soils.
Real quick before we get going, one more question came through.
Okay.
Do you have to do permeable pavement roads if they're public roads and or you're able to meet the requirements without permeable pavement roads?
If you're doing minimum requirement number 5 and you're looking at other hard surfaces, otherwise permeable pavement would not be infeasible. You then look at the amount of traffic that you're going to get on that road. And if you have more than 400 ADT, average daily traffic, then it is infeasible. So if it's a public road that has more than 400 ADT, permeable pavement is infeasible for that road. You will then go to the bioretention as your next choice. But if it has low, if it meets all the other infeasibility criteria, infiltration and depth of groundwater and all that kind of stuff, if it meets all the rest of that stuff and is under 400 ADT, you have to use it.
So that's not something where the jurisdiction has leeway, because that was then the follow-up question from someone else is, what if the jurisdiction doesn't want permeable public roadways?
Well, there's an out, a slight out there, but not a very big one. The slight out is if the existing soils beneath the road does not meet site suitability criteria, the jurisdiction can say we won't accept permeable pavement even with the 10-inch or 6-inch sand layer. But other than that, if the ADT is less than 400, and otherwise permeable pavement makes it feasible, you have to use it. The jurisdiction not wanting permeable pavement is not a reason for not using it.
All right.
We've come in contact with jurisdictions that have tried to do that, and we've said no. Any other questions?
Not that have come through.
Okay. All right. So you've seen this geotechnical report thing. Two changes on this. I now have an infiltration rate of 6 inches per hour. And the existing soils do not meet the site suitability criteria. Okay, those two things change. It was 0.3 and they do meet, and now it's 6 and they don't meet. The reason they don't meet the site suitability criteria is the infiltration rate is too high. Water just goes through it so fast, it doesn't have a chance to interact with any organics or cation exchange capacity pieces there. That's why it goes through so fast. I had another thought about that permeable pavement question, and it just disappeared from my mind. It'll come back. I'll get back to that as time goes on. And so here's my site again. But now I've got much smaller ponds going down to work on it. Here's my site. The house on my site. My thresholds, exact same table I showed before. Going through the flow chart here, and it's the same thing, flow chart. For a new development, more than 5,000, I'll do 9 minimum requirements. So minimum requirements 1 through 4, there's no change. Exactly the same as we had before. Same kind of SWIP, source controls are not applicable. It's a residential project or maintaining existing flow patterns. I'm going to go on list 2 again. So I'm doing list 2 now. Soil quality and depth, that's still there. And I need to do soil quality and depth. And now let's go to list 2 for roofs. And now downspout full infiltration is feasible. So I now need to build infiltration trenches or dry wells on my site. So I may have a UIC that has to get registered on every site. On every property may have a UIC. Now, dry wells that are immediately connected to downspouts are UICs, but they don't have to be registered with the state. So if you have a dry well, a downspout that goes directly into a dry well, right at the property line, right at the edge of the building, that UIC does not have to be registered with the state. But if you have it away from the building a certain distance, even more than 5 feet, you'll then have to register that dry well with the state. And if you put in an infiltration trench that has a perforated pipe in it to spread the water through the length of the trench, that's a UIC. And you'll have to register that with the state. But our answer for list 2 is we must do downspout full infiltration on the property to handle the roofs. We don't even get to the bioretention section there. And list number 2, other hard surfaces. We're not doing full dispersion, but we can do permeable pavement. Except, let's think about that for a minute. And where native soils below a pollution generating permeable pavement do not meet soil suitability criteria for providing treatment, permeable pavement is infeasible unless the city wants to put a 6-inch sand layer below the permeable pavement to provide treatment. And the city has the right to do that, to decide whether they want to do that or not. And the city that I'm in right now, that I'm dealing with, this project says no. I don't want to put a 6-inch sand layer because I don't want to have permeable pavement. So here's a way to get out of requiring permeable pavement. But that's only because the existing soils don't meet the site suitability criteria. Because water that goes to the permeable pavement needs additional treatment from the existing soils or a sand layer. So here's the way you might get out of doing permeable pavement in some places. And so here's what I've got. So I now have soil quality and depth, full downspout infiltration on the site, and street bioretention. So the runoff from the street's going to be going to bioretention facilities. I don't know how big those are going to be, have to size them. And the sidewalks, it has to be permeable pavement because that's not pollution generating anymore. So the sidewalks need to be permeable pavement, permeable concrete. Because if you need to put the first item on the list, everywhere it qualifies. That qualifies on the sidewalks because that's non-pollution generating. So I don't care about the ground below that being able to treat the water. But now I haven't taken care of the roads, so I have to take care of the roads with bioretention. I got to do both there. So now I've got BMP T5.13, soil quality and depth. I've got 500 lineal feet of infiltration trench. I can do a little bit on each property, or I can direct it from each property to a long one that goes across the back of everybody's property lines, whatever. I've got 462 square feet of driveways. I couldn't use permeable pavement there, it's pollution generating. I couldn't use permeable pavement, so I have to take care of the runoff from there in bioretention. And so I'm sending the right driveway runoff and the street runoff to bioretention, and I'm overflowing that to my infiltration pond. So on my specific site, I have the dispersion trench back in the back. I have AC driveway, and I have soil quality in depth everywhere. For some reason, I have that same thing twice. And so here's my site. I've got bioretention along the roadways. I've got permeable pavement sidewalks. And I've got an infiltration basin and a wet pond to do some treatment for me. So I have 725 square feet of bioretention in my driveways. My streets are asphalt. I got porous concrete sidewalks. I got an infiltration pond and no discharge off site. So again, here's my little drawing. So the roof goes to full infiltration. The lawn and landscaping go to the sidewalk. Overflows go to the roadway, and the sidewalk go to bioretention. It overflows from that, goes to the wet pond. And I need a certain size of bioretention to meet minimum number 5. The bioretention has to be 5% of the area draining to it. I could have more, but I need to have at least 5%. And so that's where this 0.130 acres of bioretention comes from. That's at 5% of the area draining to it. And now here's my WWHM. I'm not going to go through the output. So here's WWHM with an infiltration pond sitting there, the sidewalks and bioretention and the infiltration trench and all that kind of stuff. And everything right there. So, and then when I run WWHM, this is what I get. So I've met everything. What I've put in for for minimum required number 5 deals with minimum required number 7 just fine. And it also, if you look, it also deals with the LID performance standard. Look at this bottom line here. I meet the LID performance standard just as well. Noticing on this one, I've got the 10%, 1%, 10% over here. And even at those flow rates, it's way back on the zeros. So I meet the LID performance standard just as well. So let's look, do I need the infiltration pond? Can I get by without the infiltration pond? Maybe I can succeed there. Let's see if we can make something smaller. Well, no, I can't get by without the infiltration pond. That's the interesting thing about minimum requirement number 7. The really big flows, really big rainfall events have a really big impact on what you can do. They bypass really early. And so it messes things up. If you still need to have a pond, the pond doesn't need to be as big as I made it originally, but I can't get by without a pond at all. Bioretention at the end isn't enough. There's not going to be enough infiltration through the bioretention that I've sized based on minimum requirement number 5 to deal with minimum requirement number 7. But if I make my bioretention larger, I'm saying it's now much larger than I need to beat minimum requirement number 5 because I haven't met minimum requirement number 7. If I make it larger, I can meet minimum requirement number 7 by just putting that bioretention in, and I can take the pond out. And so I ran the simulation, looked at bioretention, and I got 100% infiltrated through my bioretention. So little things can make a big difference. My theory behind how to do stormwater design under our rules here in Washington State is, just a second, somebody just came to my door and I'm the only one home, so I'm gonna have to stop. Sorry about that. It was a delivery. Somebody put something on the porch and rang the doorbell, and now my dogs are all excited about what's going on around the house and stuff. You may be hearing barks from them. So back to what I was talking about. My theory is that design, do what you need to do to meet the LID performance standard or the list option for minimum required number 5. Get those in place. And then look to see what additional things you may need to do or could do to meet minimum requirements 6 and 7. So the first time you run WWHM is run it with only the minimum required number 5 BMPs, the bioretention, the permeable pavement, roof downspout infiltration, and see what you need to get from that. And then once you find out what's left, what additional treatment you need to do to get 91% treated, or what is left to get to meet the minimum requirement number 7, or even the LID performance standard, then you can modify those or add new things to get to the answer of the problem. But everything revolves around things you need to do for minimum requirement number 5, because those are mandatory. You've got to, if you're using a list, you've got to put in a BMP that's feasible, regardless of whether you want to or not. So if you don't want to put in those BMPs, you can meet the LID performance standard, and you can use any BMP you want to meet the performance standard. If you want to install 15 UIC wells on your site to meet the LID performance standard, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's hard to do when you don't have a lot of infiltration. Okay, so I went through that pretty quick, but now are there any questions on the last piece I just talked about?
Nothing in the Q&A so far.
Okay. I'm looking at our attendees and not dropping too fast. Good. All right.
Oh, we just got one pop up.
Okay. All right.
Says you mentioned it in passing, so I'm checking that I understood it correctly. Do all French drains installed in someone's backyard, 5 feet away from the house, require registration as a UIC, even if installed after development?
I think the answer to that question is maybe. So it depends on what you're installing. To me, a French drain is maybe it's incorrect, but to me, a French drain is there to intercept groundwater flows and put it into a pipe and then move it away to that pipe. If it's that's not a UIC. A UIC, you got to pay attention to what direction the water flows. In a UIC, the water is flowing from the pipe into the infiltration facility. And so if you change your mind from having a downspout that drops onto a splash block, and you are finding that you have water that you're having to, on the surface you have to deal with, and you want to build a small infiltration system to take care of that, I'd say go ahead and do it and don't worry about registering that with the state. What we're more worried about is things that are being done with the projects being developed. Things that are happening on people's property. It's happening after the fact to reduce the amount of surface water that they're getting from their roofs. You can put it in the infiltration trench after the fact and not have to worry about registering that with the state. Don't tell Mary Shalene Hanson I said that, though.
All right, and no other questions have come in.
Okay, so I got one more short thing that I want to talk about. And this might be something you enjoy, maybe not. So I want to talk about a roadway project. And a roadway project where we're taking an existing roadway and we're adding new lanes on the outside. We may be pulling up the existing pavement and down to base course and putting it back in, which is replaced hard surface, or we may be just leaving it as existing surface. So we're adding new pavement on the outside. I want to talk about how you can deal with this, because if you think about it, this existing roadway is probably crowned in the middle and water drains to each side. And so now you're going to have runoff from either existing pavement or replaced pavement draining across your new pavement. And so that's commingling. And how do you treat just the runoff from the new pavement when you have the runoff of the existing or replaced pavement combined with it? Well, ecology has identified a way that you can do some trading. We think it's appropriate for you to be able to do some trading. So here's my example project that I'm going to use to help explain what's going on. So my project is I'm talking about half of it. So we're doing this on both sides, but I'm only going to talk about one half. So I'm starting at the middle of the road, center line, working my way to the outside. I have an existing 15-foot wide lane of pavement. And I'm adding another 12 feet. So I now have 27 feet of width. I'm not making any changes to the existing pavement, but whether I tear it up and replace it or leave it as existing pavement makes no difference in this discussion. And I've got a 1/4 mile of roadway, all sloping in one direction. So the water is going to drain off the center line of the road into a ditch, some sort of collection system, and flow the length of it, a 1/4 mile down the road. And so doing my math here of 12 feet of lane times a 1/4 mile, I got 15,840 square feet of new pavement. And this is going to be a redevelopment project, right? It's more than 30, the project is more than 35% impervious. So it's going to be a redevelopment project. So let's go through the redevelopment project flowchart. So I've got to apply minimum requirements 1 through 5, apply the new and replaced hard surfaces, and the land disturbed. It says nothing about existing services. Nothing. Now I continue on down, I answer yes to this 5,000. And all minimum requirements apply to the new hard surfaces and converted vegetation areas. So what this is telling me is I have to do 1 through 5 for the new and replaced surfaces. And I have to do 1 through 9 for the new surfaces, not the replaced. Okay, not the replaced at this point in time. So now is it a road project? Yes, it's a road project. I'm adding 5,000 square feet or more of new hard surface. Now, do new hard surfaces add 50% or more to existing hard surfaces within the project limits? Well, it's 12 feet wide, was 15, now I'm adding 12. So yes, I'm adding more than 50%. If I was only adding 7 feet, I'd be less than 50%, but I'm adding 12 feet. So I'm answering yes there. And by answering yes, I have to apply it to the new and replaced hard surfaces. So here's where things get sticky about whether you are keeping that as existing or replaced. Let's keep the existing pavement existing. So I have to apply 1 through 9 to the new and replaced hard surfaces, but I have 15 feet of existing surface and 12 feet of new surface. And that 15 feet of existing runs across the 12 feet of new. So I'm asking that question. What about the existing pavement that drains across the new pavement? How do we deal with that? I don't want to have to put in stormwater controls for all that existing pavement. Nothing in there tells me I have to treat that. Why do I have to do that? Well, we're giving you an out if the local government allows it. So the local government may allow the minimum requirements to be met for an equivalent, and that's both flow and pollution characteristics, area within the same site. So that part talks about a development. So if you're putting in a new strip mall, and you have some new pavement you're putting in and some existing pavement you're putting in, you can treat runoff from some of that existing pavement and not have to treat runoff from an equal amount of new pavement. It shows up easier when you're looking at a road. For public road projects, the equivalent area does not have to be within the project limits, but must drain to the same receiving water. So what am I doing? I'm substituting existing pavement, runoff from existing pavement, for runoff from new pavement. So I'm going to provide treatment to runoff from existing pavement, that 15 feet in the middle that runs across my 12 feet. And that allows me to not provide runoff treatment for some new pavement, because I have to treat 15,000 plus square feet of new pavement. But if I treat 15,000 square feet of a combination of existing and new, I'm getting the same amount of treatment, right? So let's go and look at what we have. So I have an existing roadway that's 1,320 feet long, 15 feet wide. That gives me 19,800 square feet. And my new roadway is 15,000. So I'm going to go back at the most upstream end and treat 15,840 feet of runoff from all 27 feet of that roadway. And doing the division, I have to do treatment on the first 587 feet of that road. And I can leave the bottom 733 feet of that road untreated. I don't have to do anything down there. So I've traded. I said, okay, I'll treat runoff from existing surfaces. And now I don't have to treat it for the new surfaces, even though I was required to treat all my new surfaces. I'm allowed to do some trading there. And you can do that on site plans too. If things are, as you're laying out the site, you have existing surfaces running over new surfaces, you can take that area and now treat some other new surfaces. So it's a little game, but you can play that game. Questions on that piece? And the whole thing, because that was the last thing I'm going to talk about. So I'm here to answer any questions on everything we've talked about today.
Let's see if anything shows up in the Q&A. So far, it's quiet.
Wow, we only lost 2 people.
While we wait to see if anyone else adds something in, I did want to say thank you very much for sharing this presentation with us. It's extremely useful and extremely important. Really appreciate you taking the time to put on this
You're very
class.
welcome. I do have an upcoming presentation for a group of permittees. We're having a meeting on December 17th. I can't remember exactly the name of the organization, but the person I've been talking to is from Woodinville. So it's permittees in the Northern Sound area. We're having a meeting on the 17th. And she's asked me to talk more about the construction SWIP, those 13 elements.
All right. Looks like we've got a few questions rolling in. Oh, and Central NPDS coordinators,
Yeah,
says Leah O, which I believe is who,
Okay.
she's from Woodinville, if I'm
she's the
not
one I've been
mistaken.
talking to. Hi, Leah.
Yeah. Question is, who is responsible for registering UIC facilities?
The owner. So if it's a developer that's installing them on their property, they need to submit the application. If it's the city and can own it, then they have to submit the application 60 days prior to installation.
And is that last part for trade-off in the manual?
Yes.
And a couple of thank yous in there for you.
Volume 1, section 2.4.2. That's a direct quote.
That may be it.
You guys are easy. Now I got to take care of all the emails I've skipped.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. And again, thank you, Doug, for your presentation.
Thank you for putting this together, Diane.
And there will be a recording available. I'm actually just stopped the recording, but I will send out an email to everyone once the recording's available. And I believe it will also be put up on, well, the City of Anacorta's website, the Washington Stormwater Center, and Skagit County as well.